the Square Off board, one of our sponsors for the event. If you don't know what the Square Off board is, it actually makes the moves of games automatically. Yeah, what you're seeing in front of you is not Wizard's chess, it's just Magic. And if you are interested in getting a Square Off board, you can see actually the Chess.com discount code. Go over to squareoffnow.com for 10% off during the World Chess Championship only. Nobody's blinked yet, right? The staring contest is on. Have you ever done that? Right? How long can you stare? Staring contest?
Let's do this.
Don't blink. These
Not
lights
blinking.
are really burning my eyes. I blinked.
I did. I'm not going to for a while.
I'm an old man. You never blink. It immediately plays bishop to d6, saying, I'm not worried about my knight on d4. Robert, explain things.
Well, there's going to be a discovery there, right? So if knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, bishop takes d4. Well, we got a pawn, and you can take on b4 or on g3, or you have to kind of choose where you're willing to capture.
Yeah, because if you go for this and we continue to play the Desperado game in the end, black gets a pawn with check. This is a funny one. I think today I got trapped behind a mob again and couldn't get photos of the players, so I took photos of my friends and colleagues instead. This is Mike Klein. That's a great photo of Mike. I mean, it's weird looking, but that might just be Mike. No, I'm kidding. I saw a really funny comment. I don't know why I have to read this. I think it was somebody, they call me Brian, said, but what does Ja Rule think? I don't know why I found that hilarious. That's Twitch chat for
Ja
you.
Rule, what is this?
What does Ja Rule What does Ja Rule
What is
think?
this,
We could get
2002?
Ashanti on the line, right? We might find out what Ja Rule thinks.
Oh,
So.
gosh.
All right.
Yeah, I think Bobby can definitely hang. If he doesn't give Magnus the type... So, let's put it this way. Yesterday's game was probably the best position that a player with the white pieces has had in the entire match yet.
Yep.
If Bobby didn't play bishop d2, for instance, and could have had a grip on the queen side but didn't press. So I feel like an advantage like that, both of these players can definitely work with, but something like this where the material distribution is so equal, there's no imbalances really. I think Fabiano, even though he's up against arguably the best endgame player of all time, it's not going to amount to much. I think Fabiano's technique to hold a position like this, I'm curious how Magnus would respond to that.
And what's your thought about that? You're thinking that b5, you're not worried about the c6 pawn becoming weak. What's a line you calculated for the fans here?
Yeah, b5, I don't think white should take it. I think if you take it, then black takes with probably the a pawn towards the center, opens the a file, gets that nice a4 square to work with.
Okay.
So what if we try to improve this slightly for black? So let's say we take this line where you're playing rook d to c1. Let's say I play rook a6 immediately, and I'm going to double, and then this is the idea. Just try to liquidate.
Yeah, that's definitely reasonable.
John, you can draw highlights on our board anytime. So, Madam, don't be so disrespectful to my idea. I have feelings here. There's 30,000 people watching this. Is that a term you use often?
Well, I love the Ninja Turtles, so...
Who doesn't? Raphael for the win.
What?
What's wrong with Raphael? He's
What?
so passionate.
Are you serious?
Oh, I mean, I like Michelangelo.
So emotional. Raphael's too emotional. Down in
Well, that break didn't last very long because as all of you just found out, the moment we did go to a break, we had a peaceful result occur, and Magnus just not interested at all in pushing this forward. Game 5 coverage of the 2018 World Chess Championship is about to begin. Thank you to all of you who are already with us. Twitch TV/chess, chess.com TV, the official viewing portal of the event, chess.com/WCC 2018. There's lots of ways to get in on the action here, and lots of things that my partner here has to say, and he's been patiently waiting for me to be quiet, because he's going to tell you, why he believes Game 5 is, okay, hype aside, obviously the next game is obviously the most critical game, but why is Game 5 the most critical game of the match so far?
Well, Fabiano has the white pieces, and he's not really proven anything with the white pieces thus far. Yes, Magnus was uncomfortable in Game 3 in the black side of a Rossolimo, but with Magnus about to get 2 whites in a row after this game, Fabiano cannot afford to let Magnus gain that momentum, that confidence that he doesn't seem to be having quite yet, and get those 2 whites in a row where he's likely to score a potential win.
And I think that brings up a good point in regards to why both of us see this game as so critical, Fabiano. You talked about Magnus now gets 2 whites after this, and if we think about Magnus Carlsen's history in the World Championship matches and how he's done in all of them, This is where you really have to prove yourself if you're Fabiano before giving the defending champion two opportunities with the first move. And so, because even if the first one doesn't go well, he's going to poke and prod his way to definitely be pushing, we would imagine, in Game 7. And so let's talk a little bit about Magnus Carlsen's tenure here as world champion. We've talked about it before, but remind all of you how he got here. He defeated Vichy Anand in 2013 to get the title. He defended the title for the first time against Vichy Anand in 2014, so sort of back-to-back Carlsen and Anand matches, and then defended the title 2 years ago in New York. But I want to talk about that first match in Chennai, Robert, because I think it was similar in the sense that it took Magnus a little bit to get going. Not to say back then he wasn't afraid of Vichy, but it was his first match, so he was nervous, right? He didn't want to lose the match, and it took him a while to get some decisive victories. And so it reminds me a little bit of this match where I don't think Fabiano's afraid of, I don't think Magnus is afraid of Fabiano, but I think he's still finding his way a little bit in the match here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Magnus, as you said, he has the match experience. He did defeat, he supplanted world champion Vichy Anand. He defended title against Vichy Anand. And then we saw a little bit of a slide against Karyakin in 2016. And much has been said about that in terms of, well, Magnus didn't exactly think that Karyakin was the right challenger, that he wasn't the number 2 player in the world, and this is the right matchup. And, well, he respects Fabiano Caruana, as does the entire chess world. And we'll see if Magnus the Black Pieces can hold today. This will be a real test for him because Fabiano has been showing some good preparation with the black side. With the white pieces, both players have not gotten anything. And if Fabiano can get into a position where he has a strong center, as we know he loves, he gets in a position that he feels more familiar and comfortable with, he can actually get a victory in this Game 5.
Yeah, and I think that we'll know quickly. I mean, okay, how quickly. We'll see what opening they get. I'll be surprised if we get another Rossolimo, but we said that before Game 3. But I think we'll know quickly whether or not Fabiano senses this is an opportunity to really strike. And I'm going to guess that if he feels that pressure, Robert, he doesn't go back for the Rossolimo because he didn't get anything. And so if he goes back in for the Rossolimo Sicilian, as you can see right there below us, the opening played in both Game 1 and 3 was a Rossolimo. Not to say that he doesn't think he can win, because why would he do anything he didn't think he could win? But to me, that doesn't show like a sense of urgency the way we see it, and so maybe his team doesn't feel that that it's exactly as we see it. As we see it being, Magnus Carlsen is about to get 2 whites after this match, and that's going to be really a potential turning of the tides if Fabiano doesn't strike today. So let's talk to you about who will be joining us today, because today's kind of a fun day. We've lined up a couple of special guests that may not be the most known names or faces to all of you in the chess world, but they are stars in their own right, both in their own genres. Liv Boeree actually joined me, Jennifer Shahade, and Daniel Negreanu in a Poker Stars Hand and Brain chess event we did not more than about a month ago. She's a poker professional with a lot of money. Have you ever made that money in chess? That much money in chess, Robert?
I wish.
Right. So she's made a lot of money in the professional poker circuit. She's the founder of Raising for Effective Giving Charity. Does a lot of philanthropic work. What's not listed there, she actually has a TED Talk recently, but it kind of goes into being an accomplished television host, an academic speaker on the subjects of poker, probability, and life lessons. The next guest we have is a friend of mine. He's been a big fan of chess, more than people even know, and he's the general manager of the Houston Rockets. He co-founded the now annual MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. He's credited with successfully applying advanced analytics to the NBA. In fact, people have already talked about how maybe a movie will be made after him, like they did with Billy Beane, with Brad Pitt playing Billy Beane, Moneyball, so Morey Ball. So Daryl Morey is a huge fan of chess. He's actually done lots of different chess events, both in Houston and working on bringing some different chess stuff into the MIT Sloan potentially the Sloan Conference this year. So both these two are kind of pop culture stars, I guess, in their own genres, and both huge chess fanatics.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the big point here is that we're not bringing random people on set. We're bringing stars who love chess. In fact, as you mentioned, Liv Boeree had the match with Daniel Negreanu that you and Jen Shahade took part in.
Right.
And Daryl Morey has been a renowned chess fan for years. So it will be great to have them on set to hear their thoughts with the championship and kind of how chess is applicable to other realms as well.
Yeah, so we're about 4 minutes away, looks like, the liftoff. Checking in on chat there. Shout out to the amazing Chess Bay, all of our moderators. Don't see NJ Greg yet, but he was really active in our last show. So just want to give a big thanks to all of our mods and those behind the scene who helped make this event possible. We get some messages from people on the rest day that they want the action back, right? But we should remind them that there's a lot of other things to check out on the rest day, not just me and Robert. International Master John Bartholomew has been hosting recap shows. There he is. There's NJ Greg. What's up, buddy? Shout out to that mod. Love that guy. But International Master John Bartholomew has been hosting rest day recap coverage. He did a phenomenal job yesterday breaking down games 3 and 4. Coming up after that will be International Master Levy Rosman. Levy will be a guest on our show tomorrow to talk about his thoughts on the match and to kind of talk about what he plans to cover as far as the angles he'll look into during his recap shows. If you haven't been watching Yasser's recap videos, you should. He's diving into so much information. Instead of combining games into one video, he's basically been breaking them out into each game, getting its own individual video for premium members. So that is content worth looking into. And then we have daily recap videos by Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. So for all those tweeters getting at us, we appreciate it. And we know that you love the show here, and hopefully that continues to be the case. But make sure you give these guys the love they deserve. They're working hard with some amazing breakdowns. There you have it. That's the square-off board, Robert. Stop using your Jedi mind tricks to make the pieces move. It's false advertising.
It's just funny timing because I wasn't even paying attention to the board when this was happening, and so it seems like I'm clicking things. But no, that board moves by itself as long as you have the app. So it's really cool square-off board that's all sitting right in front of us.
Indeed. And sorry, I just grabbed my coffee while you were talking, so I wasn't ready to pick up after that comment there. So cheers. The merch store, get your mugs, right? You can also get Pro Chess League gear there. We did a PCL hype day on Game 4. I believe there was still some back tax.
Back tax?
That's why I'm drinking coffee right here, everybody.
What?
There's still some backpacks left and still lots of ways to follow the Pro Chess League. That was one of the most fun, I think, daily questions we did because we had a ton of engagement. People really excited for the Pro Chess League this year.
Yep. And I don't even know what the daily questions tend to be, so I'm always caught by surprise by them. And the answers have been really great there on Twitter, so...
Yeah. That's a good cue right there, because what is our daily question today? This is going to lead to some fun conversation, because you and I both have a lot of opinions on this.
Yep.
It's been a topic of discussion, I think, for years, given not just the idea that maybe a knockout would be more exciting than this head-to-head battle. I think this is great stuff. It's heavyweight boxing, if you will, for chess. But also the fact that, because the qualification system, Robert, the Grand Prix and FIDE and Aegon, there's been some fair, I think, criticism at times that it's been a little complicated as far as deciding who the next challenger will be. And one way we solve that is get away from kind of a complicated system to get down to just 2 people and hold a knockout every year or every 2 years, right? And see more turnover. Now, for those of you who may be kind of younger chess fans, you probably don't know that there has been a FIDE Knockout World Championship for years, or there was, right? We mentioned Rustam Kasimjanov.
Yep.
Fabiano Caruana's main second was a FIDE knockout champion. The first ever one was Alexander Halifman, who won in the first ever FIDE knockout in Vegas. So Ruslan Ponomaryev, who's a streamer for Chess.com and Twitch. So it's not like it's not a format that's existed. And I think there's cons to that as well, because do you really get to decide who the best player is if you don't have this sort of format, right? If you have the format you see in front of you, this is the epic. It's like a best of 7 in the NBA, right, Robert?
Right.
The best team almost always wins. Always wins, I would say. The best team win. I mean, okay, barring injuries, barring circumstances. Like in 5 games, sometimes upsets happen. In 3 games, right? But in 7 games, the best guy wins. Yeah. The best team wins. And I think that's the argument for keeping this type of really epic one-on-one battle.
I think the difference is in chess, the draw is so much more likely, right? There are no draws in the NBA, and of course, we talked to Daryl more about that a bit later. But the fact that there's so many draws means that one decisive game can turn the tide. And, well, that's part of chess, right? We have to admit that that's how elite-level chess goes. And as for a knockout format, I love it. The World Cup is fascinating to me. But then again, there are things that happen where Magnus Carlsen lost in the last World Cup in 2017 to Hu Zhongji of China. And I think we can all state with certainty that Magnus is a much stronger player. So
Don't hate on my boy, Boo. You're my boo, Boo. You're my boo.
I'm not hating on him. But at the same time, it does create a dynamic that's very difficult, because if an elite player loses 1 game out of 2 and all of a sudden they're knocked out, is that really a fair system either?
And does that even lead to more viewership from the fans, right? I think people really want the format that's going to be the most exciting for all of you and going to get the most people to tune in. So is a knockout format truly something that does that? I don't know. But All I know is that we do have chess, we do have liftoff, and we do have another Rossolimo. The crowd goes wild. Somebody just lost money on Vegas or wherever they manage that chess betting site. And so I'm going to be openly critical immediately.
Yep.
I don't agree with this approach from Fabiano Caruana's team. I'm obviously anxious, like all of you, to see exactly what they have in store for changing the game. But for those of you who've been following the match, you know that this is now the third Rossolimo, and Magnus has so far, to me, won the battle then from a match like practical direction standpoint, because he surprised Fabiano clearly in game one and showed that it wasn't an aberration. I'm going to keep going back to the Rossolimo because I don't think you can outplay me in these positions. And Fabiano, okay, now he's playing even faster than he did in game three, which he played faster in game one. But where's the beef? I want to see it. I'm hoping that I'm wrong about being critical of this approach, because I really anticipated and told you I thought 1d4 was coming today.
Well, he didn't take on c6, so that's a critical difference in this line.
Yep.
So he
that's
puts
immediate difference. Yep.
He puts the rook on e1, so that maybe he's not going to take on c6. Or a big difference in the current position is that instead of, if black doesn't play a6 and plays, let's say, knight to f6, right? Normal knight development. We've seen in past games this knight comes to the d7 square. But with lacking access to that square now, I have to move e5, let's say knight d5. If I do take on c6, this knight has a more awkward square. Okay, it can come to c7 to e6. It's often a very good spot for it. That also limits some of black's camp. And whoa, look what we're seeing in this game. After e5, clamping down the center, making sure that this d4 square is very well covered.
We have the sharpest
B4.
line you can get here.
Yes.
The sharpest line you can get with b4.
Wow. Okay, so, we were critical. Well, I guess you were critical. I didn't get to voice my criticism yet, but I was also thinking the same thing, that there was indeed some criticism with the opening choice to repeat something that hasn't gotten him much of anything. And instead, we have the move b4, which Magnus Carlsen likely was not anticipating in this variation because, well, how could you go into this game thinking that Fabiano Caruana would play the move b4? It does make a lot of sense. And the reason why it's not so surprising to me from Caruana's perspective is that we always talk about his central control. And if you take on b4 with the pawn, you're giving up a free pawn. That's for sure. But after a move like a3, if you continue taking pawns, here the pawns challenge each other in a3 and b4, then my bishop can take on a3, and you're going to have a very difficult time castling, as you can't castle through check. And if you put this pawn on d6, it quickly becomes a target, as the bishop on a3 still hits that pawn on d6. So that will be a very interesting line to see whether or not Magnus takes his pawn on b4. I think he has to, right? You don't really want to allow white to take on c5, taking towards the center and ruining black's pawn structure. But right now, it looks like Magnus will be in the think tank for a bit, trying to figure out what's going on here. So, really good decision, I think, by Team Caruana, if it works out. If it doesn't work out, it's just a bad move because you've lost a pawn. But I think from a practical standpoint, to gain time in the opening, to make Magnus on... It's not putting Magnus in neutral territory, it's putting in Fabiano's territory, and that's a critical distinction.
Well, and it's the first opportunity to help me eat my words of the day. This time not for a blunder, Robert, but for my sort of criticism of why are we going back to a well, like I said, that's been giving us some bad tasting water. But hey, two critical differences Robert has just highlighted, so there was no reason for me to interrupt. Not giving up the bishop pair. The reason we play this early rook e1, as you said, right? Keep the option of keeping that bishop on the board. And it doesn't get more aggressive in this line than the move b4.
Right.
So if Magnus was thinking that Fabiano was going to go for a Rossolimo, but Magnus was going to have his way with prep, Fabiano is definitely setting the tone. At least from that sense, he kind of agrees with our pregame talk, which is that this is a critical game. Fabiano is about to get black 2 games in a row, and even if you don't win this game, you want to show something different than what you've shown with the white pieces, right? You want to show that you can press. And I think b4 is a move that is looking to be super aggressive and do that.
Yeah, and there's actually a game from the 2017 Grand Chess Tour between Etienne Bacrot and Alexander Grishuk. Though that game was in a rapid time control, so make of that what you will. But this position has been seen quite a number of times, actually, a couple hundred.
But I think you make a great point. It was a rapid time control. This is the kind of opening that has so much double-edged ness, if we're allowed to say that, and potentially risky things for white because it's a pawn sack. That's why you often see those types of openings in rapid settings, because usually in a rapid format, what's true? Your opponent doesn't have as much time for preparation. They're also not going to have as much time at the board to figure out your interesting idea. So that's why you see openings played in rapid that are often not played in classical chess.
Right.
But here, Fabiano is saying, look, because of the match situation, because this is such a critical moment, I'm going to play an opening that, you know what, there may be, I'm going to say that there's probably 2 or 3 lines for black when you sack the pawn here that black is going to be okay in. But if he's got some novelties prepared in each one of them,
Yep.
and you bring that kind of aggressive tempo, I can't wait to see what happens here.
And there's also something said for repeating an opening. I know a lot of people will voice criticism, same thing happening over and over again. But at this kind of level, when you
Guilty. I just did that on Bishop E5.
when you are capable of playing so many different openings,
Right.
when you repeat the same thing, your opponent might not expect it. That sounds
Right.
weird, right? How can you not
Right.
expect something that keeps happening, but you do expect your opponent to deviate?
Right. Well, the other thing we don't expect is that we've had so many people getting involved. I think I accidentally tweeted some song lyrics, not even related to the World Chess Championship, Robert, the other night, and it led to a string of tweets of people coming up with poems and song parodies. Obviously, that one referencing the legendary, I believe it was still Destiny's Child then. Destiny's Child, not even Beyonce. That's how well I know the evolution of Beyonce Knowles. That's a Destiny's Child song.
Yep.
Yep. But just for the record, you're welcome. So, all right, B4. So let's go down that line again. Let's analyze. Ooh, knight takes. So we don't even need to. But knight takes is different than the variation you were talking about. Robert showed C takes B4, everyone. And after A3, kind of a position where you can see pretty clearly some compensation white's getting for the pawn, right? Double bishops, long diagonals, everybody's happy. Here, Magnus takes with the knight. What are the drawbacks of this version of taking the pawn?
Right, so the big difference is that A3 doesn't actually make any sense here, because by playing the move A3, you're just encouraging the knight from a weird spot on B4 where it's not really doing too much back to the center with knight C6. So bishop B2 just played, and I was about to highlight that bishop B2 immediately strikes in the center. You have 2 attackers here and just 1 defender for black. So how do you defend this pawn? It is illegal to make the move pawn to D6 because the pawn is pinned.
Right.
F6
That's a really good point.
F6 is a really poor move because it just blocks in your bishop. Although in some lines it is possible, but then I would, as white, immediately try to do something like C3 and then D4 and strike in the center.
Because what you're saying there is, hey, you just voluntarily closed one of your supposed to be most important protectors of the dark squares, so I'm going to immediately challenge those squares.
Right, and by striking the center, black's not castled, so you want to get an initiative very quickly. So bishop b2, I don't expect to move f6. I expect queen to c7. That makes a lot of sense because it defends the pawn on e5. It develops the queen so in the future your rooks are connected. But at the same time, that queen on c7 can potentially feel iffy if you can attack it. Right, a knight c3 to d5 jump would be very annoying.
Knight c3. Black might have to develop something like knight e7 specifically to deal with the threat of knight d5, and you may see lines like this anyway. White being ultra aggressive to use the initiative you've gained, because how do we gain that initiative? When we played b4 and black moved a piece twice, right? It allows us to potentially bring pressure to key points in the position before black, for example, gets the king out of the center and all those things. So a line like this would be a good example of white really being on the aggressive. Of course, black not being able to take because opening the rook would be a very bad idea, especially with the king still here. And if you see moves like the queen coming back, you're still in a position where white has gained a pretty big initiative. Though this might be a line we might see, Robert. How would white continue here?
Yeah, definitely one of the two critical lines. And if white were to play this, the question is, how do I continue piling up the pressure? My knight's very well centralized,
right.
But then what? Black's next move is trying to castle.
Right.
And once my king gets to safety, that extra pawn will start making itself known. Not to mention the move a6 at any moment will kick this bishop away from the b5 square.
Right.
You don't want to retreat to a4 because then pawn to b5 will come, and you're going to keep attacking that bishop with tempi. So I'm not sure I really believe in this as much as instead of knight to c3, if we go back, move pawn to c3. And after knight to c6, now d4. I think you have to be very quick in a position like this. Sacrifice material. You often don't want to just sit on the position because if your opponent is able to castle and get centralized and just fully developed, then you are down a pawn, and you feel it much more.
Right. And here, after d4, I'm not even sure how black would handle it, actually, because you don't necessarily want to take everything and open everything up, especially with the king there. But if you don't, then other threats for white to get potentially long-term versions of pressure. I mean, so there's d5 is a threat. There's in fact, we should just point out that knight e7 isn't even possible because of a move like d5 followed by d6, which is win a piece potentially, maybe not.
Yeah, but,
But,
your
okay.
pieces are very uncoordinated.
Very awkward. And
Well, I think after queen c7, c3, and this line we were just looking at, that black, black is sort of forced here, and maybe d6, excuse me, is the move because d5 looks to win a piece as that knight is pinned, but a6 comes in. This is a common move in a position where there's a pin, either on g5, d8 diagonal, or b5, e8. You attack that bishop and a bishop a4. Then it still looks like I'm losing a piece, but of course b5 comes into play, and I block that diagonal.
right. Okay, well, this is definitely going to lead to some exciting conversation, at least from the early stages. Will Fabiano get enough compensation for the sacrificed pawn? Will Magnus say, hey, yeah, you surprised me, but, dubious openings are dubious openings, and I grab my pawn and I'm going to run? Or will this be exactly what Fabiano's team needed to do in Game 5 and get long-term lasting pressure, potential winning chances? We're going to be joined now by FIDE Master Mike Klein, as we pretty much always are to start a game, really early today because the action is already heating up and getting so exciting. And I think that we'll get right to the questions from the press room. What's the buzz? How surprised were people by the third repeat of the Rossolimo, but then definitely changing the guard, not going for the same variation, Mike, playing something that is normally reserved for rapid chess here?
Yeah, actually, it's funny, Danny, but the life of a chess journalist and a photojournalist is that we're jockeying for position to get photos, and oftentimes we're the last people to know about the actual moves on the board. So
right.
it wasn't until I was checking my frames to see if anything was in focus that I saw that there was this pawn on b4 for some reason. Now, personally, I believe that if you play any iteration of the wing gambit, your opponent should resign on principle. But Magnus seems to have not done that. Actually, the only time I've ever been in a U.S. Open bulletin was for playing the wing gambit, and it was because I was kind of pissed off at the world. So maybe Fabiano feels the same way. And of course, to our younger readers, what is a bulletin? We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, exactly. What's a physical magazine? What's a bulletin? Yeah. Well, okay. Now that you've had a second to gather yourself, let's go back to where you just were. Then you were inside the main room taking photos. What's the demeanor of the players? Did Fabiano put off a little bit of I have a chip on my shoulder, it's me versus the world, and was that the vibe you got before seeing that he went for an opening to suggest that?
Both players were stoic and stern and focused as usual. However, the interesting thing is after b4, as you could guess, and as you saw, Magnus paused, and then he leaned back in his chair almost like he was more comfortable. It was almost like a not a fake tell, but like, I don't want to show that I'm rattled here a little bit. And he actually turned his face to the crowd a little bit, and we got some of our best shots, which is abnormal because as you probably have seen, his hand is up to his face. So he's trying to make the physical posturing that this is not bothering him, at least in as much as I can read body languages. So that was my take on it. It turns out I'm getting some intel here from Tarjei Svensson on Twitter. He said that Carlsen actually faced this move once before against Daniel Stellwagen and Vaikon Zay in 2005. That was a draw. I'm sure you guys knew that, though, right? You knew that already.
Of course. We just hadn't gotten around to mentioning it yet, obviously. Robert, looking that up right now so we can make sure we reference that and see exactly what games.
I got to say, one of the reasons I have all this intel is because we have the world's best free agent journalist right beside me, Ian Rogers. And actually, that was some of the buzz before the round is, the continuation of the story on this accidental or maybe intentionally leaked video. There's still actually some very high-rated players who think it was probably leaked, which is interesting. And Ian Rogers wrote about it and had some of his things censored on Chess Life Online. And as was very public on Twitter, he's actually, his tenure at Chess Life Online is over after a decade. It was his call to do that because of some of the edits they made. I actually have an exclusive comment from Ian Rogers on the whole situation. So let me just bring Ian on the show. Ian, what would you like to say about the incident?
Yeah, well, Mike, no comment.
There you go. The exclusive no comment.
I love it.
So all the other Norwegian journalists are probably already typed that up and published it. But like any good journalist, he doesn't want to become the story.
Well, so. I was going to say, and who said chess doesn't have controversy here? There we just saw that this story made it as far as being covered on CNN. I'm actually most interested about the last comment you made about so many top players maybe thinking that it was leaked, looking at the information, thinking that there really isn't anything critical enough to believe that it's really that big of a deal. I mean, okay, news is news and we have to cover it, but How much do you think this is really playing a part in Fabiano or Magnus's state of mind or approach to the match?
I'll say two things on this. I mean, psychologically, I think it's kind of damning to Fabiano that anything was released because, what they have for breakfast is a closely guarded secret during these 3 weeks. But for Magnus, he's such a sportsman. I have a feeling he does not want to win this way. And he's got a little bit of a tricky situation because he's so good. He can win on his own, as we all know. But now if he plays into a line that was listed on the chess base files, it almost looks like he's doing it intentionally, even though there were so many lines listed, he might have to go into one. And
right.
I know he doesn't want to be have that perception that he's taking advantage of this intelligence that's come across his desk. So I don't envy Magnus's situation either, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
And actually, just while we are on the line here, I got an email, an official response from the U.S. Chess Federation. If you guys would like me to read that on the air.
Go for it.
Okay. So again, continuing on with the story about Ian Rogers' tenure at Chess Life Online ending. So Dan Lucas, who is now the Senior Director of Strategic Communication, formerly he was the editor of Chess Life, and he has said on the record, U.S. Chess decided not to publish the screenshot, although we were okay with the description of it, since we did not create it and the creators took it down. U.S. Chess is ultimately responsible for what we post on our website, so we must retain editorial control. We've had a most positive relationship with GM Rogers, one of the world's premier chess journalists, for over a decade, so we are sorry to hear he no longer wishes to work with Chess Life Online. So mostly boilerplate there, but they're saying they want editorial control, which of course they have the right to do. But it's interesting. Chess.com made the decision to republish some of the tweets that were already out there. We thought that was a good happy medium between publishing the full video and not publishing any visual representations at all of what happened.
Yeah, and that seems to be a pretty well-tempered response. Of course, it's a shame because, I know Grandmaster Ian Rogers quite well, great person, great journalist, so it is a shame that this whole controversy has even happened, as you stated. And I have a question for you, Mike, about the perception. And it's not about a perception of this controversy right now, but you made a great point that maybe Magnus has some psychological pressure to avoid those lines because he doesn't want to be seen as using that as a weapon. But how about, you said he looked relaxed after this B4 move, but he continues to think. So was that a kind of a false tell? Do you think he was bluffing, that he felt comfortable in this line, whereas his time usage suggests that he's not so comfortable?
Yeah, that'd be my best guess. I mean, in the early moves of the tournament of the match, I've seen him lift his leg up over his other leg and sit in a comfortable position. But this time, he physically leaned back from the chair. In fact, I just published a photo on Twitter at Chess Mike, to see that photo, where he looks genuinely like he's watching a movie, like he's kicking back and about to have his first glass of wine or something. But it's so demonstrable that he did this right after the most exciting move of the match, B4, that I think he's doing it well, it could be subconsciously, but he's doing it to try to show Fabiano that he's not being physically rattled. I know we overanalyze every single movement because we have little to go on, but that would be my best guess as to his physical posture.
Well, and there you go. We have the tweet that you just sent out, just to show everybody that you are telling the truth, as they say in this world. If you don't have picks, it didn't happen. There's the picks. All right. Well, I mean, obviously, like you said, we have a lot to look into here. I think we'll jump back into the chessboard because there's a lot to discuss, because whether Magnus is bluffing or not, we're having force theory happening where it looks like Fabiano might at least get his most aggressive chance or aggressive position he's had with the white pieces so far. Whether that turns into some of the best winning chances he's had or not, we'll find out. So, Mike, amazing stuff. Thanks for telling it like it is, basically, and bringing us the unbiased opinion and version of everything happening over there, both from the hashtag FabiLeaks controversy. Why is that no one started that hashtag? I feel like I
You just
started
did.
hashtag FabiLeaks. To what's going on there. Obviously, fine line. Nobody wants to make the news; they just want to report on it. But when things like this happen, it's like I said, unfortunate, I think, for everybody. And I'm curious to see whether it continues to remain a storyline throughout. But we'll let you get back to it. Give Ian our best and everyone there, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow.
All right, I should do so. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. Well, we have a lot of chess to look into right now because while Mike was bringing us the the backstory of what's happened here, and certainly there is a lot of controversy around the hashtag FabiLeaks, hashtag you're welcome. But so A6 was played right when Mike joined us. And there were two options, of course. I was expecting you want to keep the light square bishop. I think my bias to the bishop here instantly thinks that. But then Fabiano immediately plays A3.
Right.
So clearly preparation.
Yeah, and the reason why is you're right. You want to keep that bishop on b5, but if you had retreated it instead, then that extra pawn feels more noticeable. So if you after a6, if you go bishop retreats at f1, knight c6, now I protect my pawn e5 without any worry.
Yep, everybody's healthy, everybody's happy, and that pawn wasn't worth it. So you're kind of all in, so to speak, to use a poker term when we'll have a very special poker guest today. So that means a3 was played.
Right, and knight c6 was possible to retreat that knight and say you have to take me on c6. Otherwise, as I noted, I still have that extra pawn. So you take on c6, d takes, and knight takes e5. But now we have a sort of worse version for black of a typical Rossolimo.
Right.
That pawn on a6 does not want to be there because that weakens the control of the b6 square. Not to mention that the bishop on b2 stares down that bishop on g7, allowing threats like knight takes c6, opening up that diagonal. So this would have been an interesting development, and I think Carlsen
just to show
was
that
wise to
tactic for
avoid
everybody,
it.
this is a discovery on the queen that would immediately lead to a win of the dark square bishop. So okay, very awesome. I'm following you. So that means Carlsen doesn't really have a choice.
Yep.
He had to take on b5, but he did take some time before doing so.
Exactly.
Fabiano immediately captures, and we're seeing forced moves here that are in some ways suggestive that both players are, okay, confident, I guess. We're already on move 10. They haven't taken a ton of time, but the fact that Magnus took that time before dealing with a3, a little bit suggestive that maybe he's uncomfortable here, and nobody likes triple pawns. You can't tell him. There's nobody on the planet that's a fan of triple pawns. I mean...
And I actually don't think it's the worst position in the world if you do take that pawn. So he went d6.
Okay.
And I think that's a very principled move because he's saying if your pawn takes c5, well, now I have two options. One is I can take back on c5 and then allow you to take on e5 and maybe play a move like knight to f6. But this is exactly what Fabiano is seeking from a position like this. He's got a very strong center. And we mention this every single game, right? Fabiano's desire to have more pawns in the center. He enjoys having the very strong center. But you don't have to take on c5. Because for black, after pawn takes c5, because that pawn on d6 does protect the e5 pawn, so maybe you can make a move like knight to e7, developing the knight, and after pawn d6, queen d6, you're protecting e5, but you do have these weaknesses over there on the queen side. So you do have the bishop pair, that's the nice thing. The not so nice thing is these ugly ducklings on the b file.
Yeah, but okay, so this has all happened so fast. We've had surprise with maybe criticism that they're continuing to go back to, but then like a clear show of a hand in the sense that I'm here to win today with this move b4. If you're just joining us, super aggressive approach taken by the American, surprising Magnus. Not because maybe surprised him already that he repeated this on the analysis board of Rossolimo again, but then he didn't go for the line that has already been the roads that have been traveled on. Goes a completely different direction with this really ultra-aggressive approach for white, normally reserved for rapid and blitz play. So Fabiano bringing the heat to Magnus. This is just a quick recap for all of you who maybe just got here. And after Carlsen took the pawn, we've seen nothing but basically really fast moves by Fabiano, suggesting he's in his prep. And now with an hour and 42 minutes, that means again he has more time in this position than he started with, and Magnus is once again thinking.
I just wonder though if this is a one-off opening. Not the opening, but this particular variation, I should say. Because Fabiano has said that in some of his post-game analyses, for example, he beat Hikaru Nakamura in the Sinkfield Cup with the white pieces. And after the game, he said, well, it's not really something I would use again because it was more of a surprise weapon.
Right.
And I wasn't expecting to use it against Hikaru, but it worked out in this game, and I won that one.
Right.
So I wonder if he's using this to say, Magnus can't expect it, I know it better, and that will lead me to the best practical winning chances. But right now, I really think that black's position is okay for the time being. I think the move knight to e7 and just played is the correct response. And what this game really is about right now is the central control.
Yeah.
If black can castle and stabilize, black has the bishop pair, and really those what I'm calling weak pawns on the b file aren't that weak and not that easy to take advantage of.
Well, I was going to say that it seems to me that the other way to look at it is not that weak or that easy to take advantage of, but the clearest targets that white has gotten out of the Rossolimo of any game so far. I mean, it's hard to say that Fabiano won't have some opportunity to push here. I mean, there's a little bit of an edge. The bishop pair to me, doesn't fully compensate for double pawns that while they're not under pressure right now, they are on an open file, and therefore at some point, usually those are the kind of targets you want, doubled isolated on an open file. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not disagreeing that I think Black's position is fine, but if you're evaluating was the surprise of b4 effective, at this point I would say advantage Fabiano.
I'm not sure I agree with that, actually. Yeah,
All
I mean, I see your point.
It's fun. I like it. I like the disagreement.
The tension is building here.
Yeah, I love it.
And I think you raise a very good point, but if a player of Magnus Carlsen's caliber faces a sort of novel opening, something that's not expected at the highest levels, as noted, the only really top-level game I could find was this game with Grishuk. This is a black piece in a rapid. We made note of that. And he has faced this b4 move, I guess, a long time ago against Daniel Stellwagen.
Right.
But when you play something like this with the white pieces, if you are not really building yourself an advantage, if your opponent is strong enough, as Magnus Carlsen surely is, I just am not sure I see the way to continue to increase
So what you're saying is maybe his body language is not faked, because the one way to look at it is he's like, all right, the fact that you're playing something like this shows you're desperate. I mean, that's kind of what you're suggesting.
I'm not saying desperate, but I'm saying more so, you're trying for offbeat lines that may give you an advantage. And I do think white is slightly better. I certainly agree to that. But I'm not sure these optimize the winning chances. Because we've seen in most games one side being slightly better, with the exception of game 1 when Magnus was just completely winning. Both games, all of the games players have been jockeying with that advantage and losing steam at a certain point.
Right.
And I think that this is one of those positions where even if white, wins this b5 pawn, I'm not sure there's enough left in the position to really significantly press for a win. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Advantage Caruana, agreed.
Right.
But winning chances, I don't think are optimized in a position.
Okay. Okay. No, and I think that's fair. And I think it's the fact that Black has already gotten himself maybe out of the worst of it here, right? In the sense that, okay, a lot of times when we see gambits, if you look at the analysis board, moves like b4, we think, oh, somebody's going to get, a full-blown attack or something really clear to justify the material that makes you feel in trouble. And maybe, like you said, Black took an approach that was solid enough to be sure that he is going to be getting castled here within the next move or so. Just played the move b4, so certainly need to be thinking about queen to b5 check in addition to taking here. But I actually really like that move b4, Robert, because what he's saying is not only do I think I know I'm going to get castled, but now I'm going to flip the script. I want to focus on making your job of getting developed a little dysfunctional. By taking these squares, what Magnus is saying is a move like queen b5 check will be met by knight c6. Yep. I protect the pawn, and okay, I've survived the worst of it. Yeah, I've got these ugly ducklings, but I'm not sure you really have enough to justify the fact that your queen side also has something to be desired, right? How's that knight getting into the game? So interesting stuff here, and now we see Fabiano has already played the move queen to c4.
Right, and queen e2 actually is the first new move as far as I'm aware. There had been a game previously played in this with this line 97, take on d6. But queen e2, looking new, b4, and queen with the pawn on b4, as you mentioned, now the pawn's in a safer square. The knight can come to c6 and protect. Black is one move away from castling, and queen to c4 was indeed played. So, queen to c4. Queen c4 was played. Just to verify. But okay, the queen c4, clear plan. Attack this pawn on b4, and now it's a tricky position because how do I protect that pawn? If I go knight to c6, then perhaps. What is the reaction after knight c6? It looks like
I'm wondering if you're going d4.
I think you are going d4. That's making it really difficult for Black to contend with.
That's ultra aggressive. And what's funny about the move b4 is that queen to b5 check, as we just highlighted, would have been met by knight c6 and everybody's protected.
Right.
But
and
queen to c4, if it does the same thing...
Well, it's actually unclear. I think we should show why there's a big difference. A queen b5 check.
Okay.
Sorry. You queen b5, knight c6, d4. I can take you on d4. After knight takes c4, I can castle. Because if you take my knight on c6, I take back with the pawn, and all of a sudden your queen's under attack, as is your bishop on the a1 square.
Right, so I don't have time to just grab this guy.
Exactly. With the queen on c4, now if I do the same thing with knight to c6, d4 is very powerful, and after pawn takes, knight takes, well now if I castle, I simply lose the pawn.
Takes, we trade here.
Trade there first, and then take on b4, and then that is a very big advantage for white.
Yeah, this is the kind of positional edge that, and this is the healthy pawn. We always said that when pawns are on one side of the board, you on which minor piece?
The
knight, right? Because the knight's ability to maneuver in and out and poke and prod and allow me a chance to draw colors, that's what we all want, right? But seriously, the knight has a much better winning chances in a 4-on-3 than a bishop does against either knight or bishop. So this would be the first real winning chances that Fabiano has had in the match if something like this occurs. So Magnus has something to figure out here now on queen c4.
Yeah, there's the option knight c6 still exists. Queen a5 is another move that comes to mind.
Okay.
Very sharp play here because queen a5 removes the queen from the king's safety and attacks the pawn on c5, protects the pawn on b4.
And I'm thinking about this guy.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm saying it also attacks the bishop on a1.
Okay.
So you have to think, do I have bishop e6 as an intermediate move here to attack the queen? I'm not really sure. This actually, I'm just seeing this for the first time. I think black would be okay trading queens, but taking and
my
playing,
biggest worry is the e5 pawn.
Right. So I was gonna go knight c6 first, and then king d7, and then scoop up that pawn. I'm not positive, of course. I'm just seeing this position for the first time and trying to evaluate in the fly.
No, this would be a key line if black can get away with something like this, because if you can gather that pawn without any other damage happening, you've still managed to achieve your goal of why you pushed that pawn to b4 so long ago, which was to keep this knight kind of out of quickly getting into the game.
Right.
So that's an interesting line. Okay, for sure.
And so, I mean, what else? I mean, queen a5 looks really nice because if I can sort of force that action, and a queen a5, if you play that, then c takes d6, bishop e6. It's not forced that white plays queen c7 there, but I don't actually see where the queen retreats to. So queen a5, pawn d6, bishop e6. So where else can the queen go? I think this is an important moment. I mean, you have no other space in the c-file.
Well, I think you have to go for this.
Well, you can potentially retreat and then take the knight on e7, right? That's sort of
a trade.
The give and take there. But where does it go?
Right.
I think this leads to a decent position for black. I don't even have to take that pawn back with my king. Okay, queen d8 checkmate is a big threat.
That's a big threat.
So I can go queen a5 back to protect.
Well, I think you may have to, because if you do take this pawn with the king, now you're running into shots like this.
Exactly.
Right, and you're getting discoveries on the queen and things like knight to d5 coming.
And not to mention, after king d7, also queen b5 looks very tough for black to do, attacking two pawns at once.
So something like this, and now I maybe regret my queen here unless I can justify ultra-aggressive play, something like queen d6.
That's interesting. And maybe b6. Oh, no, b6 you have queen. No, I think I can go b6, potentially.
Right.
I thought you queen
I'm
b8
playing
check.
d4, I think, right? I think best for white to just forget about trying to justify anything immediately. But okay, I don't think this is the best black can go for, because here I think this is maybe a little bit of danger.
Well, if pawn takes d6, I have to go bishop e6.
Right. Maybe we're back to queen a5 being slightly questionable, because to me, if this position is opening up like this before the king gets castled...
Blunder checkmate in 1, by the way.
Where?
The chat is going for it.
Where?
After 17 queen d6,
yeah,
b6 does not work because queen d8 is
queen
made.
d8. Well, neither one of us was thinking about that. So, hey, Danny's not the only one who blunders.
I blunder all the time.
It's okay,
I blunder
right?
all
it's
the time.
There was a great tweet yesterday, maybe we could find it, where somebody said that worth watching the show just to see me blunder and then Robert,
And here it's the other way. The chat found my blundering checkmate in 1. And I love it. They say Krumnik blundered mate in 1 before. So, they're making me feel better.
Everybody blunders.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. Everybody blunders.
Well, I would say it's more like that book, right? Everybody poops. It's like the child book.
Well, now we're going all the way in.
It's a book.
But hey, it's your doctor. Don't be afraid to talk about it. All right. Well, the first P word ever said on one of these shows just happened. But we're sitting here eagerly waiting. We're going to take actually a really quick break. We're going to keep the live position on. We want to make sure a couple of things that we're going to be doing here for the better part of the next 6 hours, hopefully. All the technical stuff of this broadcast remains right what it needs to be for all of you. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. You will still see the live position, and we're excited. Today's going to be fun.
Yep.
to steal a line from my friend here, oh boy, Robert Hess was right. Queen A5 has been played on the board, and Magnus Carlsen is willing to go for some of these super sharp lines that perhaps you and I were just analyzing, buddy. Let's take a look.
And here Queen A5 has happened, so Magnus is really up to the task today. That's what that tells me. Because when you are surprised with an opening that you're not expecting, sometimes you just collapse.
Right.
I've definitely been on that side of things where I'm not expecting my opponent to do something. I've maybe never seen the line before, and all of a sudden I make bad move after
Sometimes
bad
you
move.
take a deep breath and be like, okay, it's a dogfight. Here we go.
Yep.
Right?
And I love this. I mean, I think pawn takes c6 you have to play, right? There's no other choice. Because if you don't play, you just lose a pawn. Right? That's for starters. And now bishop e6.
And to just clarify that, because we don't want to dismiss anything, it's a double attack currently on the board. Bishop and pawn can't develop this knight with ease. That was one of the brilliant aspects of Magnus Carlsen's b4. Pawn takes d6 is forced here.
Right. And because if you play bishop b2, you just lose that pawn c5, and that's a pawn you can't afford. We talked about a pawn sacrifice before. This would not be a pawn sacrifice. It would just be a pawn loss. And actually, I should show why. Because after queen a5, if you play bishop b2, you don't want to take that pawn right away on c5, because if you do, you lose the e5 pawn in response.
You gain a tempo first.
Exactly, you gain the tempo, you force the queen back, say to d3.
And now you, wherever she goes,
you take on c5 with the queen.
Right, and so you're not removing the defense of this pawn. That's critical, right? White has two attackers, so I shouldn't take that for granted. That's a very good point. And okay, so that means we're going to see c takes d6, we believe.
And bishop e6.
Bishop e6 seems forced unless knight c6 is possible.
Well, I think bishop e6 first is nice, because that we were looking at line with queen to d3, and after queen e3, I don't have to take your bishop. I can just go knight c6 now.
And I think this is key.
Right.
I think this would be a line where black can actually justify allowing such a strong pawn on d6.
Yep.
White has won back the pawn, but I've got issues with this guy, issues even with this guy a little bit. Okay, this bishop is developed nicely, but how do I defend it? That's the problem, right? So that means I have to make moves like this, and I'm still dealing with irritations for the rest of the game.
Oh, queen a2, that almost wins a piece.
Right. In fact, that would be an awkward way to win a piece if you're forced to play a move like bishop c1. This is like a tactics trainer problem you get where like nobody finds it right away because you're like, what? Like queen a2 suddenly that's a computer move, right? They don't miss it, and human beings don't see it right away.
You do have to be careful, just to show everyone, but before you play queen a2, you have to calculate what happens on the e5 square. Because by putting your queen on a2...
I see your trick.
Exactly. If I take on e5 this way, got it.
I got it. All you have to do is say squares. I'm just one step behind you, baby. Story of my life.
And if you take the other way, so that you don't lose the piece back, let's say you take with the bishop on e5, knight takes e5, knight takes, and queen b5 check now.
You still have issues with b7.
Exactly.
And you can't move this knight because...
I've already blundered one checkmate in one today. Don't want a second
I was
one
giving you the opportunity to go 2 for 2-0 before I blunder my first checkmate. It'll happen. I mean, the clock is counting. Clock is ticking down. So, well, this is... I mean... can you feel the life here? I'm excited. This is by far the most exciting opportunity we've had. I mean, I'm going to do my first call out to the chat. I mean, are you guys excited? Seriously, let's get some... Throw me a Caruana hype emote. I mean, seriously.
Oh, I see an OMG Danny and a Hess Bay emote
I'm going to throw out my first Caruana hype emote.
But there's a great question I want
to
throw out from Super Brawley. He says, Jim Hess, knight g5 before c takes d6. And now knight g5, this is a great question, because knight g5 threatens the f7 square.
Yeah.
But the problem with knight g5 is I castle for black, and now you could take on d6, and it looks more powerful, but still knight c6.
Right.
And the pawn on d6 is not going anywhere for it.
And all of a sudden now your pieces are just scattered.
You go bishop b2, now I go h6. I'm just kicking that knight away.
And then you're playing bishop e6.
And then I'm playing bishop e6, and then I'm playing queen a2.
This is how good gambits go wrong, right? X-rated edition, all right? Be careful with these types of where you allow yourself to look at superficial threats without the concrete follow-up, right? We can't play hope or if chess. So I always would tell my students this. Here's how you do it. Like, it's okay to be a great white shark. Smell blood in the water, meaning you recognize weaknesses, recognize the potential for tactics, but don't go forcing it, right? Allow your opponent to blunder those weaknesses rather than forcing it. What you want to focus on are the concrete advantages you already have in a given position, and if you can build up random little targets here and there while doing a concrete plan, that's how people blunder, right? So don't force superficial threats and play if chess. Play concrete plans, and then let those weaknesses build up to your opponent naturally blundering. Okay, c takes d6 is played. Like we said this was forced when queen a5 happened. So now, my only question is whether Magnus will play knight c6 or bishop e6 first.
the reason you wouldn't play bishop e6 first is if you're somehow afraid of the ending that occurs after queen to c7.
Right.
Right? Because we have to calculate this pretty much directly.
And we did. We looked at this, and this. Oh, no, sorry, we didn't. We looked at it here and said it looks like black has time to get this. But now let's take a deeper look. You're right.
Let's take a pause just to calculate the position in hand.
Right.
So d4 is not possible for white. Right? I have too many pieces covering
It's a pawn. I like
and you can play rook d1 and get it back, but that's the best you're doing. And
let's not take it for granted. Let's just look at it. Might as well.
Okay.
Right? Or because how do we handle this?
So
Because my only point was if I get this, maybe I get access to other things.
I'm taking on d4.
Right.
And
Twice.
this is one of those positions. Keep taking. Take on c7. You can take my pawn b4, but after rook d8, I think I have sufficient compensation here.
In fact, maybe more. I have to be careful.
Right, you have to be careful because back rank checkmate is a threat, and after rook d1 check, I can put my rook on c1 maybe, and I think that this is a position where, yes, white is a pawn ahead, but I'm not sure how great the winning chances are. I think white should play
it's
the
something.
This is something
it is something
that white
right?
would enjoy going for. And bishop
okay,
e6
well, Magnus says he's willing to go for it. So as much as that seemed like a bit of a rabbit hole that Robert and I just jumped down head first.
maybe king d7's wrong here. Make castle.
Maybe you don't need to put the king there with check.
And now after knight
Now
d4...
you have pins.
Oh, well, you just lose your rook.
My first blunder.
There's a pawn on c7. You made, I think, the worst possible move on the board.
Why can't we get a face where you blunder? Like, seriously.
That might be the worst.
I wasn't, if the pawn was so far advanced, I thought it was a black pawn. Like, I mean, you're not even thinking about
right. How did the white pawn get there?
Okay, but the idea is still there. All right, here we go. Takes, knight c6, this d4 move, chop down, Prekarovka. All right.
And you save a tempo here.
So I can take here.
Because now you can take
This is not a threat.
No, it's not. But maybe knight takes d4 here, and now rook c8. And
Right.
oh, actually, don't do this. Bishop b6 comes.
Ooh, problems.
That is a problem. That means, okay, well, this is, the rook's coming d8 anyway, and
Same
I'm in
thing.
trouble.
In fact, now you have to be careful about other things.
Yeah.
Okay, probably not a concrete threat, but... Okay, so this may be Magnus recognizing, all right, Fabiano has proven his gambit. Perhaps he even regrets b4 a little bit. It was the first move he played really quickly, and when Fabiano plays queen c4, the time taken by Magnus suggested to me maybe he underestimated this move, right? Because suddenly it's like, I was looking at queen b5, queen c4 comes in, and I can no longer go for the obvious way to defend b4 because of white's ultra-aggressive plans.
Right.
And if that's the case...
I still think black should be all right.
Right,
Again,
queen a5 takes here. And so let's see. I mean, this is the big moment where I think Fabiano has to prove his prep.
And it's an interesting time to think, because this doesn't seem like Magnus has done anything spectacular, anything out of the ordinary. Well, this whole opening has not been ordinary, but once you're in this opening and in Fabiano's wheelhouse, I don't think black has done anything particularly special. So he's probably debating or deliberating between queen c7 and another move, but I think white is in danger of becoming worse if you do not play queen c7. I really feel that black has more than sufficient
and the reason for that is that the retreat, we're not going to go for some sort of trade and lose our right to castle, everyone. We're going to move the knight, like Robert said, and white is in danger of being worse because bishop under fire.
Knight stuck.
Knight stuck. Really, really key point. That's really irritating. That may even lead to other serious problems of pieces getting trapped in a really surprising way. And your extra d6 pawn isn't effective enough to compensate for that.
And you're going to lose it very quickly.
Right, you're going to lose it. I mean, you might even lose a piece before that happens. So, I mean, that's the real problem, right?
Yeah,
but
even if you don't win the piece, bishop b2, castle, rook d8, take the pawn.
I just want to go in.
Yeah, we're talking about those tricky lines with the e5 square, but yeah, it probably doesn't even work out. I still think that black is doing well in a line like this, but it's just something you have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, because let's say we go for that line you talked about where the queen comes in.
Maybe knight d7.
I think if bishop d7.
Knight d7 might be a way to start.
Oh, knight d7. I was saying you have this too.
Oh, that's true.
Right, that was the line I was going for.
Also looks decent. It makes it harder to castle. So
but yeah, but that's why I think yours might be better. Yeah, knight d7 would say I can get out of dodge and everybody's safe for now.
Still many pawns for white.
Yeah, this would still be an interesting little transition, but probably like us, sort of salivating for the piece sack in game 3, right?
Yep.
Probably not something that white can really justify. And so again, unless there's some other trick here, Fabiano maybe has to go for this queen to c7 move, and time being taken by the American now, really for the first time in the game, trying to deal with bishop e6, which suggests to me the prep is finally running out.
Yep.
Maybe he planned on getting a position like this, but now there's some real concrete calculation that has to be done from here on out.
I think that's the problem with having the white piece in the engine era, is that you play lines sometimes that don't actually amount to much, but you do it for the trick factor to be in your wheelhouse, not your opponent's. So it becomes very difficult to defend on the fly. However, Magnus Carlsen, I mean, he's proving a lot to me right now. I think that his position is totally fine. I think after Queen C7, which we're saying looks to be the best move, because otherwise you're in danger of having a worse position. But after Queen C7, I think that Black is going to find a way to equalize and hold a draw. So this goes to show that, like you said, maybe the team Caruana is a bit, I think, desperate strong, but they're just really searching.
Or they just agree with us that, okay, the middle of the match where your opponent is now going to get 2 whites in a row, it's, there's momentum there, and you'd like to maybe deliver a blow now if you can, right? You want to do something that sends a message before your opponent gets 2 whites in a row.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I don't see this. It looked great. The B4, it all looked very exciting, but when you're facing the best player in the world champion, he knows what he's doing. And I don't know if he's looked at this before. That is what I'll be interested to hear in the press conference. If he just had this. He's just reflecting on his preparation, and that's why he spent time, or if he just came up with everything in the middle of the game, which is very impressive.
Right. Meaning Carlsen or Caruana?
If Carlsen came up with everything during the game to find the correct path of defense, and I don't want to say this is so easy.
I thought you were almost asking the question now, which is is Caruana still in prep? We suspected not because he's taking time, but is this also one of those moments where he wants to confirm that he feels happy about where the game's about to head? If he still believes that White's going to have the only winning chances in the end game. Black may hold a draw, but you at least want to be in a position where you're playing for 2 results.
Right. And I mean, Queen C7 has to be the move. I
think so.
There it is.
And as we say that, foreshadowed it well, right?
Yeah. So
Queen C7
enforcing the trade of queens.
There's really nothing. Okay, Knight A5. Knight C6.
Well, and use B7 as well.
Yeah. So don't go for that. Okay. I was thinking. Every time we say there's only one move, I want to make sure it's really the case, and this is the only other way to defend the queen. But yeah, this would not be ideal. So. Okay, so we're going to see queen takes c7, and we're going to get variations just like this that we were looking at. The knight comes into c6,
so the
make sure that e5 is defended.
Yep. And the question becomes, does White go c3 here or play d4 immediately? These are these kind of nuances that are very important to figure out.
Yeah, this move has a couple of pluses, right? One, now when we do go for d4, say something like this, we have the potential of keeping the 2 pawns, threats of d5. Okay, you're causing some problems there. So clearly, Black doesn't want to take it and help White develop. If you just ignore it and come forward when I take here, now your knight is overwhelmed, having to both worry about regaining material and continue to guard the e5 pawn. So c3 is a move that certainly comes to mind. We see Magnus has indeed captured on c7, with Caruana immediately capturing back. And now we're about to have a big moment. I don't expect much more than just knight to c6 here by Carlsen, but the question really is what Fabiano will do. But this type of setting where the players are improving on previous games, I think this is an interesting moment that maybe speaks to the pro of the heavyweight match versus our daily question, which is whether people would rather see a knockout format to decide who the world champion is. If you're just joining us, we have a daily question every day. Of course, get at us on Twitter with the hashtag ChessTV. Magnus Carlsen has supported a knockout world championship system, which you give Magnus a lot of credit for that, given that it's good to be king, and Magnus is the king.
Yep.
So the fact that he has the guts to say, I actually don't even believe this is the best system while he's on top of that system, you respect that. I support a knockout world championship system if by knockout world championship system you mean a world championship with actual knockouts. Touche. Get that man a diamond membership. I don't even care if he doesn't win the tweet. I told you, Photoshop goes a long way for me.
That is pretty excellent.
That's pretty good stuff.
Also, just hairy-chested Magnus, shirt off, playing a game of chess.
That was great. But I think that you could say that here what we've now seen, everyone, is our 3rd Rossolimo of the match, but each one has had a small improvement. You couldn't do much worse than Game 1 if you're Fabiano.
Yeah.
You were lost with the white pieces, right? Game 3, you never really had great winning chances, and so we were like, time to go away, right? Game 5, he goes back to it, but really surprises us with this very tricky, kind of obscure, usually rapid and blitz line. So, I know, this, as the match goes on, despite the draws and the complaints, Robert, would you say that this is one argument for the pros of putting the best two players in the world together in an epic match and letting all of us see what they're capable of, both with them and their teams of seconds?
I guess it depends what you define on pro.
Right.
Because it is showing elite level chess, but it's not showing decisive games. And so I
Right.
think the fans would love to see more decisive games, and people get restless. They don't want to see all these draws.
Right.
But that's just because it's a draw. A win doesn't mean it's a good game. It could be a terrible game. But people often look at the final box score, and that's something that I'm interested, talking with our future guest Daryl Morey about, is box score versus, the intricacies of the games themselves.
Right.
Now, I will say that people have been asking in the chat, what does the knockout mean? So I should answer that question. I guess I shouldn't be so American about it, but March Madness for college basketball,
Right.
where you have a 64, 32.
Single game elimination.
Exactly. And in chess, it wouldn't necessarily work with single game elimination because the advantage of having the white piece is too great.
Right.
But you have it be, you get one game with white, one game with black, and you have a bracket of, say, 128 players, which we do have in the
Right.
World Cup. And one plays 128, two plays 127, etc.
Well, I think the World Cup's a good comparison,
Right.
like meaning soccer, football, right? Because
with the
there
group
you
stage.
have the World Cup is not a single elimination, but neither is chess, right? It's several games in a small format, right? The
Right.
knockout would usually be something like a best of 3 or best of 5, and if that is still a tied match, you would move quickly to sort of an Armageddon tiebreaker. But the point is, it creates a mini one-on-one battle that several people are engaging in. People get knocked out until we get a champion. I think that's more similar to a World Cup in the sense of teams are put into brackets. You do have an opportunity to come back in theory,
Right.
depending on the results of the other teams and all that stuff. Even if you lose, but
I think
it'll be an interesting question for Daryl Morey. I mean, I wonder what his thoughts are as sort of a huge chess fanatic, but a guy that has obviously a ton of cred, a ton of respect in the analytics field in the NBA, right? I mean, how does he look at, how do guys like that who are on the outside looking in of chess, clearly he loves the game, but how do they look at the draw?
Well,
does it really bother them? Or,
I'm also interested to hear from Liv Marie about it, because in poker, right, in the early stages, you play all these different people. You're not playing every single participant, right?
Right.
And you can essentially, that is like a bracket format where you're on the opposite sides and you're your opposite tables, and you
Right.
work your way into the elite final table.
Yeah.
So
Well, those will be questions we'll make sure we ask both of them. Let's try to remember that, just asking them their thoughts on the outside looking in of World Chess Championship match. What makes chess and the formats that are the traditions that we've followed different to the as
Right.
compared to the sports and games that they play. So
yeah, and just like Champions League, where you get the home and home.
Right.
That's a good way to think about it, where that's how it is. We get white and black, and you keep playing. And here we have a 12-game match, right, of
Right.
this exact sequence where Fabiano has gotten white in games 1, 3, and 5. But as we noted, we should comment about that. It switches at halftime. So Fabiano will get black in game 6 and black in game 7, which makes this game particularly kind of a must perform. I don't want to say must win, because
Yeah.
I don't want to be so pessimistic about his chances.
and there we
but
go.
he needs to perform.
Yeah. Okay, I like C3.
Yeah.
We initially were looking at variations with D4, where white has a little bit more brute force approach. It immediately threatens the fork emote here on D5. But after takes and something like Rook D1, even if white was getting an edge in these endgames, we were analyzing everyone. It wasn't the kind of edge where either of us felt thrilled about white's winning chances, right, Robert? I mean, you would agree on that. I think the big issue for white is how do I use this opportunity where black now has to waste time before he regains this pawn to get some other type of advantage in the game, and that's an instructive thing for our own games, because in order to play chess at a high level, you have to allow your advantage to evolve, right, Robert? Right? Sometimes it's the pawn, then it's the positional weaknesses that you got as compensation because your opponent was in a rush to get back the pawn, and then it's something else, right? And so I think Fabiano has an opportunity right now to try to do something before black can hurry up and gather this pawn that he's currently down. And so we were suggesting brute force. Fabiano has a slight more finesse move here, which I kind of like, because he's saying, yeah, B3, but now when I play D4, you're not just liquidating my big center. And as much as that prediction by Mike Klein or those comments by Magnus Carlsen saying that Fabiano likes the center more than me seemed kind of silly to me at the time, if I'm honest, how often have we seen games where Fabiano's plan is all about central control?
Well, I completely agree.
interesting, right?
He
Yeah.
loves the center, but this position is of particular interest to me, because that pawn can't move to D5 quite yet without losing that bishop on A1.
Pin emote.
So I can go king D7 in this position, saying that if you go D5, I'll gladly take your bishop on A1. You can choose which minor piece you'll take, but I'll take that pawn back, win your C7 pawn. And that pawn on B3 is that's pretty advanced.
Right. Yeah.
So I would be concerned about that. It's kind of like a Grunfeld for the actual, for people who follow chess quite closely. There's a dynamic here where white controls the center and black controls the queen side. And so that kind of dynamic is very double-edged because you're playing instead of a symmetrical position where you're kind of going with similar
Right, and
ideas.
because both sides want something different, if
Yeah.
one achieves theirs better, usually it collapses quickly.
Right.
Like the other person's advantage just it seems like wow, this guy got crushed.
Right.
And that's what you mean by double edge, right? It's like hey, because here's the other thing, like if b3's played and white somehow maintains the center and then gathers this lost calf, white has serious winning chances,
Yeah.
right? I mean the kind of winning chances that you bring home to mom and dad. But if you don't. Then black gathers back the pawn and has a bind here, frankly, right? Is causing dysfunction for you on the queen side because you can't get developed and you're stuck.
Yeah,
So,
and that pawn on b3, if you do go b3 for Carlsen here, the pawn could go too far. That really could be a case where that pawn might just be gobbled up very quickly. And I could see we're talking about this move pawn d4, which is a good move, of course. That pawn is not going to last very long on the b3 square. Yeah, for example,
maybe you have to go here. I
knight
guess.
d2 or bishop c3 even.
Because now this is a real threat.
Right.
Real threats.
Becomes very worrisome for black. So I wouldn't go about playing b3 here. The
I
question,
almost feel like he may have to find some way where he commits to something we said he wouldn't want to do. Let white achieve the goal of completing development, but calculate some force line that you and I aren't right now to win this pawn back and just try to defend the draw down a pawn. Which isn't the worst idea, right? Because this pawn is kind of backward and ugly,
yes.
right?
So let's say pawn takes c3, knight takes c3.
Okay.
What I'm worried about is king d7, knight d5. So maybe
It's because you're holding the pawn.
I can't.
You can't take it, at least not.
Doesn't look
Doesn't
great
look
to
good,
me.
right? This seems like a real.
Yeah, that looks like you just lose the pawn in the center, which pawn you can't afford to lose.
Yeah, actually, that just looks winning for white. Okay, yeah. And then we say that because I think I'm even taking here with check.
Oh, yeah, this is your position collapses immediately. Knight takes e5.
Right.
If you take there, I go bishop takes, and I protect my pawn on
Yep.
c7.
And even something like this.
Well, knight d3 now is
Okay,
iffy.
so defend first.
Yeah, something like this. And even if you take my bishop and win the c7 pawn, I'm
Well,
up two
there
pawns
is
right now.
F6 though.
So play d4 instead of
Oh, but that doesn't work either.
rook b1. But this is getting
Okay.
still getting a little. Oh, actually, can you go back with just one move? c8 equals queen. Check after f. So
Okay, so like here.
Yep.
And the point is you get off the pin. Right? Off the pin. Check.
you get off the pin with check, and you get to take that pawn, and all of a
Okay.
sudden black's down so many pawns. So we got a little deep there, of course.
Wow.
But that's the kind of thinking that they're doing, right? They're not just going, oh, let me make this move and see what happens. They're going move after move after move and trying to figure out exactly what happens in these 5, 6, 7, 8 move sequences. So
We have a great comment right now from Diamond member Adam Schuld in the Chess TV chat. He says, what if you basically need a +2 score to win the World Cup, but the time increasingly got lower, making more exciting games? That's literally a direct reference to our Speed Chess Championship. The format of the Speed Chess Championship is one where the players are engaged in matches of chess. They're playing chess games, right? But there's an overall time that is ticking away, right? You're sort of racing against the clock, which can only be compared to more traditional sports people are aware of, the NBA, the NFL, soccer. So, of course, the finals, great transition right there, will be November 30th through December 1st, with Duda versus So being on the Friday, November 30th. And then we will have Hikaru Nakamura versus Levana Roni on Saturday, and then the ultimate final taking place on Sunday, depending on who wins between those matchups. So if you didn't know what you're going to be doing the moment the World Championship over, you're going to be joining the real World Championship. No, I'm kidding. The Speed Chess Championship, where exactly what Adam Schuld said, the overall time ticking down while you're playing a ton of games and just trying to deliver one hit after another and accumulate points. That's exactly what that format is.
king d7.
So, oh, he played it.
Yep.
King d7.
I
Okay,
like
so
that move.
He's
because-
ignoring the tension.
Well, yeah, because if you take on c3, we kept talking about that knight jumping into the center very quickly. And so instead of allowing the knight jump, you say, please take me, and actually my not yet, because I don't want to lose my e5 pawn. Well, rook a8 first. This might be a nice trick. So if I go rook a8 here,
I'm going to go here, though. I'm going to
and then I'm going to go king takes c7, I think. And obviously your knight on b1 can't move. Right? And you're up a
Don't be
pawn.
so mean about it, but yeah.
I don't mean to bully you, but you are up a pawn.
Right.
But I have the two bishops. There's some open space. That pawn on b4 might not last very long.
Well,
if I say,
I think the real key is that this is just not your favorite pawn.
And
right? And now I've permanently lost the ability to get d4.
the pawn on B4 is not my favorite pawn either, because if I go king b6 to get out of this annoying looking pin, I might go at some point f6, bishop f8, or king b5 and take this pawn.
Just get real aggressive over there.
So
huh?
this actually is a great position, and I'm not trying to claim that black is winning or much better.
No,
I'm
black's fighting for a draw here.
I
still.
don't know if I actually agree with that. I was going to start saying that I think black is actually pushing to be better.
I don't think so. I think you're being a little bit too excited about this idea. I mean, if we actually get concrete about the position,
b3 or a2, and then I kick your knight next, and I'm actually trying to be concrete.
I mean, it's another pawn.
Then I trap your knight.
Another pawn here. Maybe I play f4. Your pawn's pinned.
Well, if you go f4, I'll go f6.
Right. And
my point at large is that your pieces for white well, now I take on f4 even.
Yeah. I don't agree. I think you're getting a little too excited about the fact that black could ever win an opportunity where you're down a pawn heading into this endgame.
Well, now I'm not down a pawn, and I have the 2 bishops, and if you give me that f4 pawn, of course I'm not down winning.
You think black's better still here?
I think that with the 2 bishops, that black has the better winning chances.
Yeah, I don't agree. I don't think so.
All right.
It'll be fun.
We don't have to agree always.
We don't. I think that if anybody's playing for a win in this endgame, it's white. And I understand that there is a very real potential to flip the script and be careful about the fact that if you lose your advantage, something happens over here. But the concrete aspect is you haven't won the pawn back yet. So,
but I don't need. I guess my point is I don't need the pawn. We talk about this in many games.
Right.
It's the quality over the quantity. And so if I play this rook a8, which I think is an important inclusion, I gain a tempo attacking your bishop on a1.
Right, and there's a lot of moves here, though. I mean, I'm still up a pawn, right?
If you go knight
so
c3, then I'll take on b4.
Right? Maybe
no, I'm not taking that pawn. I'm taking the b4 pawn.
b4 pawn.
That was my point, to take away your control of the e5 square.
So and that's important because you're gathering the healthy pawn before the weak pawn, right? Because you're saying this weak pawn isn't going anywhere, and so I'll only take it when it's convenient for me.
Exactly.
Right.
And now black is the one who's throwing knight c2 or knight d3, and that backward pawn on b2 that you highlighted is feeling especially backwards.
Right, and here there's concrete threats.
Exactly.
So now I'm back to thinking we should have played the first move I said, maybe bishop c3 again.
Okay, so I'm going to take
this.
this.
So now you take it. And so white has something to prove here, I guess, before you can... So I played rook c1, which I kind of liked.
Yeah, it's perfectly reasonable move. b5 is one of those...
I also like this idea I came up with after that.
So bishop either a2 or b3, I'm not sure which.
Go for this. I kind of like the idea of me going back to get the center before you can fully
So what if I go
coordinate.
bishop h6 here? Oh, then you go b5. I take that back.
Okay, yeah, and now there's problems here.
Yes.
The knight's overwhelmed.
So I'll play f6 like I initially intended. And just to show everyone, knight takes h7 is not a good move because I'll trap your knight on the h7 square.
Running out of square. Don't go Fisher. Never go full Fisher.
Yeah,
Tropic Thunder reference.
Definitely don't go full Fisher.
Never go full Fisher. But you can back up the knight to f3 here. Do we have there? We've got more interaction with the daily question. What I don't like about the knockout format for the World Championship is that many matches would come down to rapid and blitz tiebreaks to decide matches. It's a good point because a lot of them would be tied very similar to what we already see in the World Cup, right? You would get a lot of matches heading into the rapid and blitz tiebreakers. Only necessary change, in my humble opinion, is to speed up the games a bit. Okay, well, again, now you're talking about things like the Speed Chess Championship or the Pro Chess League, but there's a lot of criticism for that, right? I mean, members, a lot of people feel differently. That there are those who drastically prefer this, the longer time control, and have been critical or just don't like the Speed Chess Championship or the Pro Chess League, right? It's a turnoff for them to not give the best players in the world the most time to figure it out. So, I mean, I think that a middle ground is kind of what everyone always wants, right? Because we want something that's exciting and leads to decisive chess, but hey, don't make the chess too bad, right? Don't make it like all blunder-filled. Let the best players still do their thing, but give me some decisive games. And I don't know that there's really a way to have your cake and eat it too. I mean, it's why a lot of people have tried to come up with creative ways to eliminate the draw, right? Which I don't know that I agree is possible,
Yeah. Part of chess, just like
it's part of
chess,
chess, right? And
football.
so it's an interesting thing. I don't know that chess needs to be fixed. I just think that it has its own unique set of challenges, and in formats like this where you have the best chess being played, Robert said that is going to lead to also less blunders and therefore less decisive results.
Yeah.
So interesting, right?
Yeah.
I think those are some interesting comments. Please continue to engage with us. Use the hashtag ChessTV. Get involved with the daily questions. All right, this is a fun one. This is the first game we've had that truly has Robert and I kind of disagreeing a little bit about who's pushing here. I still believe Fabiano has an opportunity to coordinate before Black gets all of his dreams to come true, which is to regain this pawn, maybe gain this pawn, But okay, let's keep analyzing this line.
And
'cause
I think
I
Black's
like my
dreams have
center
already come
sacrifice.
true. So
What?
this is the funny part. You think until Black's dreams come true, I think Black's dreams have already come true.
Right. Well, I guess the difference is I feel like okay, I'm still up a pawn.
Right. So you're which is totally fair, and I think this is what happens when these top players are evaluating.
Right.
Is it's very difficult to think about is it better to have the extra material or to have the sort of control over the squares.
That's why we have a disagreement here. And I've had people say, okay, neither one of us is at the level of Caruana or Carlsen, but I've had people watch our shows, both here or the Speeches Championship, be like, I don't understand how Robert and Danny could disagree so much about a position. Like
Yeah.
we're both obviously very strong chess players, but we see it differently.
Because you're materialistic.
I'm materialistic, right? And Robert is, he's not religious, but he's spiritual. So, so there you go.
You're,
who knows?
you're filling out a dating profile. For
No,
me.
exactly. No, but no, not even that. I think I'm just more skeptical that there isn't still time for white. I actually don't like the pawn I have. I
Yeah.
think it's unhealthy to be materialistic. Okay, but I think it's unhealthy. But I feel like you haven't quite achieved your dreams yet. And you're saying Black already has, and I'm like, wait, Black hasn't achieved the dreams yet. So
I
here
just
we go.
don't see how white makes the progress necessary to claim the advantage, despite being
Right,
up the
but
pawn.
you're saying Black's better.
Yes,
So,
because I think
can't agree with that.
And the reason why, I'll explain concretely the reason why.
Okay.
The pawn on b4 is weak.
Right.
Once that pawn is regained, not if, once that pawn is regained, I will have an outside pass pawn with this pawn on b7.
Okay.
I'm not claiming Black is winning. I'm not claiming the advantage is particularly huge. I would prefer to play this position with the Black pieces.
Okay, so here's what I'm saying. I'm up a pawn right now.
Yep.
You're saying this is a foregone conclusion. It might be, but by the time you get there,
Yep.
we'll see what I've managed to do with that extra pawn. Right now it looks ugly, but hold on. So I'm not saying that you won't regain this pawn, but at what cost?
Okay.
At what cost will you get that pawn back before white gets other types of advantages? So now you don't want me to get your bishop here, right? So you're moving it,
Now I'm just wondering if I even have to move it.
right? Maybe you go full steam ahead and give me back the bishop.
Say my pawns look weak, but how are you going to attack my pawns?
Right.
Your knight on b1 isn't developed.
Right. So I'm going to try to fix that because I'm
Okay.
still up a pawn.
So I may even play b5 right away. Why not?
I would love to do something nastier than just develop, but I'm not sure I have it. I'm really worried about you ignoring b4 and going back. Right?
That's what I'm thinking about doing.
Yeah,
Well, actually, I'm
that's-
going to go rook a3 if your knight moves.
Like I said, I hate my extra pawn. I don't like my extra pawn. I just want to use it while you're trying to gather it to get something else going here.
So it sounds like you're coming a little bit more towards the, hey, Black has something going on here. Knight d2, I'll go rook a3. Immediately, pre-move it.
Pre-move. You can't pre-move. Never pre-move when someone's guarding that square. That's a pro tip for everybody. That's online chess that would
But
never
rook
occur.
a3.
Right. Something like
Bishop
this.
h6.
Right. You're pinning me up.
And I'm pinning and winning. C1
mean-
from Walt Clyde Frazier.
I-
Bishop takes c1.
oh, you're guarding the rook. My bad. Yeah,
Ha.
I was thinking I was getting.
And even if not, I would go king a4 to b3 and just keep that king going.
Okay. All right. So I have to be careful. So you're saying now you're just like giving me back the bishop pair.
Yep.
Yeah, that's irritating.
I'm a middle
It's
child.
irritating.
I'm supposed to be irritating.
You are. You're proving to be irritating right now. All right, maybe I have to simplify faster to try to use my central pawn advantage.
King
So I'll play
b5.
4. Yep. 5, and I guess I have to take it. Otherwise, my plan was
Yep.
dumb.
Bishop takes.
Right. So now we've got this position where if you win back the b pawn, maybe I have rook b1 check in the end.
Yeah. Knight takes.
Right.
King c4.
You're ignoring my pawn. I'm giving you my pawn.
You know what they
Take
say
it.
in the end game, right?
Right.
Advanced, having the advanced king
It's
is a
worth
huge.
more than a pawn, very, very often, yeah. Okay, but again, here you're in a position where you're still down a pawn.
Right. I
Black's
think
not winning this
Black.
thing
No,
yet.
I didn't
Right.
say Black is winning. I
Right.
said Black has the better chances.
Okay.
And
So-
what's actually really difficult, and I've had this happen to me in games, is when I'm up material, I feel like I should be better, right?
Right.
And it's not even being materialistic, because saying in chess, well,
Right.
one pawn is actually a very important piece. People think, pawn, whatever.
Yep.
But pawn is super important. So I'm up one pawn when there aren't that many remaining. I should be better, but not so fast because I can't develop my pieces easily, and that what makes me feel like Fabi is in some trouble. Not to mention the fact that he's starting to use more time.
Mm-hmm.
He's clearly out of his opening preparation. I don't think he's gotten anything that resembles good winning chances. So things psychologically also are helping Magnus out here in this position.
Right. Okay, well, he's got something to prove right now, right? Magnus has played the move rook a8, and as you said, white is currently up a pawn, but how do I deal with that, right? Well, I guess in this exact live position, white's up two pawns.
Yeah.
But
Jinx.
What?
I jinxed you.
Exactly.
You owe me a Coke.
1 through 10, you owe me a Coke. I probably should have put some Coke in this coffee here. Not that kind of Coke.
Oh, boy.
Speaking of coffee mugs, you can get one right now at the merch store. There you go. Change subjects. Okay. Anyway, Coke in the coffee cup is a normal thing.
BJH13 just said that on the World Chess video footage,
Yeah.
Magnus looks very calm, and Fabi's the one who looks a little nervous.
Yeah.
But that also kind of matches their personas a little bit.
Right.
Fabiano's a very calm person. I know him very well, but Magnus is just Magnus. He makes some faces
Challenger
sometimes.
604 says, thanks, Rensch. I think people are enjoying the chess-you-will tension between us today. Right? You've heard of the other type of tension. You could cut the chess-you-will tension with a knife. You've always been a try-chess-you-will. You're willing to try a lot of different positions. So.
Yeah, I feel like there's some Marvin Gaye jokes here that should be said, but won't be said.
All that matters is I appreciate your willingness to push the envelope here and challenge my excited slight bias. And partly it is because I don't think that. Okay, I shouldn't say Magnus did have winning chances with Black in Game 1, right? I don't expect either of these guys to really win with Black. I don't expect it. When it happens, it's because of blunders or surprises, right?
Oh, I disagree with that too.
What?
Blunders or surprises? What about just good play?
Okay, but you know what I'm saying, right? Magnus got the winning position in Game 1 because of a really bad approach by Fabiano.
Agreed.
So what I'm saying is I think if the advantage is slipping away for White, it just makes you want to hold on for one more day. Hold on, Bobby's still better here. You're wrong, right? But, I think it's interesting to see how well Magnus has parried the exciting B4 idea and is already in an endgame position where he looks to have, good chances.
But, speaking of hold on, right? You're being materialistic to hold on to what you got.
Hey. It is a material world, and I am a material girl. No, anyway, but okay. I've conceded that I don't think Black is worse like that.
Making progress.
I completely disagree with you that Magnus is the one playing for a win here.
Okay.
But okay, and I think as we get down to lines that are concrete, you're not really, you're saying that Magnus is fine. You're not saying Black is playing for a win.
No, that's what I am saying.
No,
I'm saying sorry.
We've gone down several lines.
Let me rephrase. Black objectively may not be playing for a win right now. Magnus is playing for a win.
That's a different way to look at it.
Yes.
That's a different way to look at it.
And that's sort of what
That's partly because, as Magnus said, so in his quotes, right? Some people think if your opponent plays a beautiful game, it's okay to lose. It's not Magnus's attitude. Right. So and of course, yeah. And I think Fabiano obviously has something to prove here, still as White. And so let's go back to the fact that he's up 2 pawns right now. No way B5 works, right? Because A1 is just too valuable.
You don't want to give me the 2 bishops.
Yeah.
Because we can just put it on the board, right? B5, take on A1.
Takes.
Take, I just take back.
Right.
I'm winning C7 no matter what.
Yeah.
I'll keep the rooks on probably. I could trade them, but maybe I want to keep them on just to build some tension.
Something like this even, or it's kind of overprotecting. And now you're not even down a... Oops, sorry. Of course, because you're not even. I was just trying to prove the next point. You're not even down a pawn. Yeah, so this would be. Although the only fun idea, if I could steal something, but let's not go Fischer. Don't go full Fischer. Okay. So B5 not an option for everyone who may be wondering about that. Again, so there were 2 ideas we were looking at to deal with the threat here: Bishop C3, being greedy, holding onto the pawns; Knight to C3. Where you're going to take B4, which is the key intermezzo before you gather this guy here. So the only way we would prove that wrong is if somehow, some way, there's something concrete while you still haven't quite won back a dangerous pass pawn. But I just don't see it for Fabi, mainly because you're threatening things like Knight C2.
Right.
That's the real problem here.
Right, and Rook B1 actually threatens nothing because if you try to take my knight on B4, you lose your bishop on A1.
Yeah, unless there's some weird...
Well, I wouldn't take on C7 right. I say if, let's say, Black passed, you're not actually threatening really to take on B4 because you don't want to lose your bishop.
But these are the kind of lines that maybe Fabiano is calculating right now, regardless of whether they work. He's trying to use his time to see, is there some sort of threats or tricks that I can do? Again, while Black is trying to regain this pawn, you have to do something now to justify the whole line. Man, it's exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. Thank you for enjoying the World Chess Championship with us. About 32,000 of you with us right now. Chess.com TV, Twitch TV/chess. Just want to say that. This is fun.
Yeah.
How lucky are we? We get to, bicker about chess, and then you come home and help watch my kids.
So how lucky are you is what you're saying.
How lucky am I?
I have to argue with you, and then I have to go help babysit your kids.
Yep. You get to have Thanksgiving with us this year. So
I get to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I have to. No, I will enjoy it as well. But don't make it sound like you're doing me this huge favor.
Hey, you've eaten well.
I have.
The food's been good.
The food's been delectable. Absolutely.
All All right, well, reading the chat, just checking out how everyone's doing.
Some funny
Great way to wake up this morning on the West Coast. Thank you. I'm a Megger Pogwitis? Space Traveler LOL. I think he likes your comment about I get to. No, I have to, right? So,
generous soul you are.
all right. Well, what other plans should White come up with here?
All right, let's try to think concretely because, we have this disagreement, and we're kind of coming towards a middle ground that I think compromise.
Well, and it's getting harder and harder to see a concrete line, and frankly, Fabiano's time management doesn't inspire hope, right?
Yes.
That you would be wrong. It inspires. It feels like he's not sure exactly how he maintains any advantage at all either, right? So that means he might be now looking for concrete ways to just send this thing toward an equal result.
And to explain that to people who may have just joined, Fabiano's ahead on the clock by a couple minutes.
Right.
But the difference is that Magnus used much of his time in the early stages when he was caught by surprise, likely in the opening.
And we'll back up and show you that on the analysis board. Really, the key thing here is we had a Rossolimo Sicilian. Again, recap, that's the third time we've seen it. Surprised we were, but then happy we began to feel when the move B4 was played, at least from a, wow, okay, so there's some real heat being brought. If you weren't with us when Mike Klein was here, he said that Magnus, kind of sat back confidently. Was it a sign of, all right, my opponent's a little desperate in the match setting because I'm about to get 2 whites in a row? Or was he bluffing and feeling like, all right, I really actually am surprised right now, and we'll see what happens. Forcing lines continued here where Fabiano played much faster than Magnus. That's kind of what we're talking about in regards to the time management. And eventually led to a position where I think where we felt it was most potentially dangerous, Robert, for Magnus was right about here, right, when White played Queen to C4. And we were a little bit worried about whether Magnus had underestimated this idea. How is he going to deal with both the D6 pawn and B4? But you predicted well that Magnus had this opportunity to play Queen A5 and then Bishop E6 with tempo, because if White doesn't head for the endgame, Black will be totally happy with moves like Knight to C6, especially with dysfunctional development over here on the Queen side. So once kind of Magnus surprised or answered our question there, like was he ready for this? From there on out, it's been a little bit of, all right, now Fabiano has to prove things. He has to prove he has enough here before Magnus just regains this pawn, and with it has a fine endgame. So that's kind of a summarized storyline of where we're at.
And there's a good question by HSCER. I don't know how to pronounce that, so I spelled it out. So did White make a noticeable mistake in the last 5 moves that shifted the commentary analysis from leaning White to leaning Black? And I think the C3 move is one that we talked about, but we also were discussing D4.
Mm-hmm.
And D4 somehow felt playing with a little bit more fire, just playing quickly.
Yeah, we said
this
is the more forceful approach, right? And it makes sense from a principled perspective. Your king is not castled, which is not even about king safety anymore. The queens are off the board. It's about the rook not getting exactly what Magnus has gotten in the game. So let's look at this again. Maybe this was the...
And I wonder if after C3, King D7 is in the game. We were talking about D4, but perhaps that was impossible for, he went C3 here after King D7. It looked like D4 was an option, but clearly Fabiano didn't like it. And maybe the answer is just Rook A8.
Anyway,
the simple move.
Yeah.
Sometimes
so let's go back to D4, because this was the first line you and I analyzed, right? In terms of White trying to be principled and improving the gambit. Again, the threat is D5. Okay? So that's a fork. And taking is the obvious thing to do. And the point is we're taking advantage of Black's, like we said, dysfunctional development, and that you haven't quite won this pawn back yet. We analyze simple moves like Rook D1.
And then King D7 is what we
King D7, Knight takes here.
So finding a move here is tricky. And also, can we just go back one move so I can show something? Bishop G4 is typically a way, instead of King to D7, to pin the knight and say, you're not winning this pawn back, but with that pawn on C7,
right.
Can't take that rook.
Can't leave that pawn behind, right?
No.
Take here, and you forgot something, right? Yep. Looks like a lady. So that's key. Yeah, the more I look at this line, the more I'm now...
And someone actually just mentioned C17 Rook D1 preparing D4 was better according to Stockfish. We're not using engines, but I think that makes very little difference.
It makes sense because it's basically our line.
Right.
It's basically is D4.
It is. That's what I was going to say. It's the same thing.
Yeah, Stockfish just prefers not to sacrifice development in the move order, but it is D4.
So if you go Rook D1 first, we're going to still go King D7. And after King D7, D4, we're back to where we started.
Right.
Pawn takes
and
D4.
so let's show everybody what the end of this line was. The end of this line was us looking at a position where White maybe did have more winning chances, because at least here, despite the d-file, despite other things, it's a pawn.
Right.
You're up a pawn. And if you did manage to trade off pawn for pawn, what do we have? We have a knight versus bishop dynamic, which no one would disagree gives white, about the best winning chances you can have when all the pawns are on one side of the board.
Right.
And we looked at lines like this. Rook d1, king up here, and even though these moves looked a little like, oh, white's kind of recovering, but when the sprint is over, you're up a pawn.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you have knight c3, knight e2 perhaps.
So
and
bishop c4 might be a good move for
bishop
black.
And black has good drawing chances here, like great drawing chances, actually, because of potentially more active king. But no argument white's playing for 2 results. Whereas you have seen over the last 10 minutes, we have been arguing over who's been playing 2 results here, and I'm coming around to believing that, big surprise, my Grandmaster partner is right. Wrong again. Story of my life. Thanks, Danny.
Well, speaking of Grandmaster...
Thanks, Obama.
I see GM Alex Yermo in the Chess TV chat saying it's after Rook d1, King d7. So look at d3. Oh, maybe... at d4 right away. That's what he meant. Oh, that's really smart.
Like here.
So d4.
Uh-huh. This is what we mentioned.
Wait, where's d3? Oh, takes on d4. Rook d1. He's saying d3 now.
Ah. Look at Yermo. That's why you should check out his recap videos, because Yermo knows what he's talking about. So you're the point is you're hanging the bishop here, but you're doing so in exchange for this, and okay, you're winning back your material very quickly.
Yep, you just take. Oh, you're going to rook g8
I was going to say, yeah, that's why I hadn't moved yet. I wasn't sure which one I want. Do I want the bishop or the knight?
Oh, if it's rook g8, the bishop can still move, but you're giving white the option to make a bigger mistake. I think you can do either one. But
it's an interesting... I'm not even sure it's... Okay, so...
Take the knight on b1.
Yeah, let's take the knight on b1 and then move the rook. Yep. I do have the...
Can't protect that pawn on c7 so easily.
I can go here, though. That's my...
What if I take your bishop?
Right.
Maybe you could go bishop h6 to bishop d4 and protect via the f4
Ah, that's an interesting route. Right.
But then I'm concerned about black's pass pawn too, right? King d7.
Or even b3 right away.
Yeah, one move or the other, and now I'm just trying to...
Oh, no, you can't play b3 right away because I take it.
Right.
Haha. Right?
You just sneaky
guy. So king d7, bishop f4, and then d3.
Whose pass pawn is better? White's is further advanced.
Rook d1 check is possible, but it's...
Just move my king side.
And again, sadly, probably, as anybody wants to say when they want to sound like a smart commentator, they say it looks drawish. So, I mean, again, like it's probably heading for a draw even in lines like this. So, interesting stuff. But d3, very nice shot. Thank you, Alex Yermolinsky, for being here. Remind everybody to check out his daily recap videos on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, anywhere your heart desires. Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky releases in-depth analysis the moment the game is done. Like, literally, I think his videos have been first to press. There's, about a half an hour in, so make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already.
Yeah. So, Fabiano's still in the think tank. So, he's going to be continue thinking for a while here. I think he's just nervous about his position. He senses that Magnus is picking up steam.
Well, it's a good opportunity because now we've talked about this position enough to really... Now we need the players to show us what they're about to do. So let's take our next quick break. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. And we are back, though still waiting right now. Mr. Caruana on the clock and thinking about how he wants to deal with Magnus's rook a8. And again, maybe just proving Robert more right, that he does feel like, all right, I need to be really careful here and try to make sure that Black hasn't suddenly flipped the script and gotten an advantage. So let's take a look at the live position. As we do so, we can see that promises that I made are true. Fabiano has not moved yet, probably deciding between things like bishop c3 and knight c3. We've analyzed this position pretty deeply here, so I think it's fair for us to say let's wait to see what line they want to play.
Yep.
And let's bring on our first special guest of the day. We have with us on the line here the Houston Rockets general manager, Daryl Morey. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should, because he's one of the most interesting personalities, not just on Twitter, but in all of sports, to be quite honest. His pedigree speaks for itself in regards to who he is and what he does within his field. A lot of people don't know that he's also a huge chess fanatic, active member on Chess.com, looking to do maybe some chess stuff at some point here. But Daryl, if you're there, we're gonna bring you on the show so that everyone can hear you, and not everybody knows, I think, how closely you've been following this match. So tell everybody what your view has been and how excited you've been to see Fabiano, an American, challenging for the world title.
I'm excited. I've been following every game on Chess.com, and I'm Team Caruana because Magnus has outed himself as a Warriors fan, so I can't really get behind that. But looked pretty exciting game today, and that looks like Fabi had generated some interesting chances, but the world champion, so now it looks drawish.
Yep, it looks drawish. And as you said, it looks and drawish is probably the safest bet. I don't know if we're allowed to tell that full story, but yeah, you and I were talking with Magnus, and you invited him to the Western Conference Finals, and he said, yeah, no, and he was honored by your invite, Daryl, but then said, hey, I'm kind of already going as a guest of the Warriors.
he was already there. So.
Right, he was already there. That was a fun story we got ourselves in.
Obviously, like the Rockets, we keep punching at the champs, and so far haven't beat them, but we think this is our year, and I think this is Fabi's year.
All right. Well, we'll ask you about that. We definitely got to get some Rockets questions in later. But we have one question we wanted to start with because it's been the topic of the day. The daily question today to all of our fans has been, do you like this format of the best two proven players in the world going at it in what is a long and epic match, which therefore, with all this preparation and time on the clock, is going to lead to some draws, right? It's going to lead to some games that don't give the fans the bloodthirst they want, right? But the other con of a knockout system might be that it's too crazy, right? And we don't ultimately really know who the best player is. As an outside expert on sports looking in, when you look at the chess world, what are your thoughts on that? Do you believe that there's something that needs to be fixed in regards to helping it be more engaging, more approachable to the casual fan, or do you like it just how it is?
I do think that some changes should be made. I'm big on making changes. I've been in a big part of a lot of the changes the NBA has made over the last 18 years or whatever I've been in the NBA. I really push for rules changes in the D-League. I think, it depends on your goal. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a huge chess fan. I think there's no reason why it couldn't be one of the top esports in the world. It's sort of on its way there, I think, as well. And I do think more aggressive time controls, maybe Fisher random, things like that, I think are needed to sort of expand the interest in chess. I know I'm probably making a lot of older grandmasters upset right now.
Well, I'm a young grandmaster. Well, I like to think I'm young at least. But Daryl, I think a lot of the fans want to know, what is your background in chess like? When did you get into the game? Do you play often? So if you could tell us your chess background, that'd be great.
Yeah, I play all the time on Chess.com. Got into it when I was young, probably for the same reason most young geeks or nerds do. It's a fun game. It's the only one without a random element. I do think having a random element can be good in games, but chess is unique in that it's not a solved game, even though there's no randomness. And I played a lot. I think at the age of 14, I played in the Ohio Chess tournament that was held in Akron, and I did pretty well. I actually did way above my rating at the time, which I think was like 14 to 1600. Honestly, I'd have to go back and remember. And that encouraged me. And then I sort of faded on interest, like many people do, but I faded on interest, and now I just play for fun on Chess.com.
That great. And I have another question for you, slightly less related to that one. But in the NBA, people look on previous stars with a skeptical eye in the age of advanced metrics. How do you think that applies to chess as well, where people love Mikhail Tal for his exciting tactical games, but then say, well, maybe his play wasn't so great. So in the NBA, there's people look at more like a EFG, field goal percentage and things like that. So how do you think that relates from chess to basketball?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of analogies going on right now. A lot of people are very technical, and I don't know. I've met Fabiano, and we had dinner in St. Louis, during the Sinkfeld Cup. Seems like a guy who's very smart, very well prepared, and when you use analysis in sport, often that analysis can do things like simplify the game, which is find something that works and do it over and over and over. And I think that's impacted baseball, that's impacted basketball. People are, somewhat, even though the game has gotten faster and I think more space, more exciting for creativity in basketball, some people think it's gotten less interesting because there's more threes. There's less of a diversity of the shot selections people take. So one thing I've talked to Bill James a lot, and he's probably the godfather of all sort of sports analysis, is, using analysis to do what you guys said earlier, which is change the rules of the game such that it allows for more diversity. Examples of that could be, more dynamic substitutions in basketball, just coming off the top of my head, or again, I think more time controls in chess would allow for more instinctive and creative play from folks.
Yep. Well, on that point, and we're actually showing. I think that's where the debate comes in. So if there's an agreement that's held by, let's say, both sides, all parties, right, in regards to something needs to change to help the game become a little more exciting, there's been the approach of, is there a way to eliminate draws? Is there a way to make wins worth more points than draws, right? So a win is worth 2 points, and a
Premier League, right?
right, and then there's I think what you just said, which is add instead of messing with the game and the pure format of the fact that, look, a draw is possible, like it or not, there's add other time elements. You've talked about the Speed Chess Championship being something you've tuned into, where we have the running clock, right? So for the first time, chess has this NBA element where, regardless of the score, you're also running out of time to make your move, right? If you from the outside looking in, because this is going to be a topic all day, given our daily question, if you had to vote, I mean, it sounds like you're saying find ways to do things like that, like add other elements that speed up the game rather than messing with the purity of the game and trying to eliminate the draw somehow.
Yeah, I wouldn't change the game. Although I do like some of the Fisher random, or I think what's it called?
Yeah.
9
Yeah.
or something like that. I forget the other name for it. But I do think anything that puts, as you can tell, the positions even in this World Chess Championship get more interesting as soon as they're out of their prep. I think as soon as they're in where they're just playing chess and they haven't been able to set it up, and that's why maybe it is messing with the game, Fisher random, but I do think adding elements that allows players to get into more instinctive situations is better. And I saw Hikaru. I didn't like that he was going for Magnus, given he's an American and things like that. But I saw Hikaru make comments that, and of course it plays into his strength of being a one of the best, if not the best, speed chess player in the world. It allows getting into more chess instincts. And I love Levon Aronian. I love his attacking style. I love his instinctual play. I think he had MVL as well. I think he's a very instinctive player. So, I sort of like those kinds of players.
I told people you were a fan of the game, and you're proving that to be true. Yeah, I know that you follow all this stuff closely. And okay, now we finally have a move, bishop to c3. So Caruana is going to try to hold on to that extra pawn, but we'll get back to that in a second. What
I have
you
a
talked
question
about?
for you.
Sorry,
Can I
say
ask
that.
you, why isn't it a bigger deal that the first American since Fisher is playing for the World Championship?
It's a great question. I mean,
I have a potential answer, Daryl, and I think it's partially your sports' fault. In America, we have so many star athletes, right? We have, James Harden, LeBron James, just to name a few, just in basketball, that in America it's not as big of a deal because it goes under the radar and hidden. I think that's really
so
Do
basically
you
the
think
dominance of the main
Fabiano
sports.
grew a big beard?
Fabiano needs a huge. There you go. Then we could have.
Yeah, give him a Harden beard.
Right, we could have him with a hard. No, that's a great point. I think that Robert's response to that is an interesting one because someone like you, who's a chess fan, like wants that, right? And we all do. But then there's people that just don't find the personalities big enough when they're used to personalities like LeBron James and James Harden, right? Hashtag Team Beard, right? The beard.
Fear the beard.
The beard. So
I've heard we could start a war with Norway or have them try and meddle in our
we start. The other thing you were talking about Bill James, obviously kind of the godfather of sabermetrics, right? And this sort of advanced analytical approach to the game. I don't know how closely you followed our own kind of trying to do that, a version where we talk a little bit about the analytical approach that removes some of the gamesmanship, our CAP system, which is evaluating these players kind of against themselves when you compare them to the overall accuracy that they've proven that they play with, how often they blunder, how often they match up with the top moves by the best engines. And I would say that even though, okay, there's all kinds of arguments to say that data doesn't fully reflect what the matchup says, I think that what we would argue is sometimes people push back against the data because they don't like the randomness. They don't like sort of the romanticized part of the game to be removed when we're telling them, like, look, like this is what the data says. How much pushback have you had that in the NBA, whereas you've continued to push more and more for an analytical assessment of players that maybe tells people this guy's better than this guy, whether you believe so or not, right? Based on it takes plus-minus ratio on the court to a whole new level, right? What are your thoughts on that as far as chess sort of pushing back on the involvement of engines? Like, hey, don't burst my bubble about how good Paul Morphy was, or don't burst my bubble about how good Mikhail Tal was. Like, what would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love what you guys are doing. I think it came out of a lot of your development for sort of anti-cheating.
Yep.
It's on Chess.com, right, where you're able to detect patterns, where people are playing more like engines and things like that. And it's absolutely important, but that debate's going on massively in basketball. So if you apply the analytics that sort of are able to tease out how much a player can impact the win probability of a game, it does come out and say things like Kobe are not as good of a player as people think, or Allen Iverson or things like that.
I was about to ask you,
Right.
Daryl, so I'll let you finish, then I have to ask you a question.
Yeah, for sure. And what it does is it really does make some of the old guard upset. And to be fair, like people who were fans of Kobe or fans of Allen Iverson or a lot of great players in the past, a lot of the data actually that you need to really know how good they were, which we have now, was not available, especially if you go back even to Allen Iverson, or if you go back even farther back from that. Some of the great mid-range players of the past. So it's very it's very interesting. And yeah, I do upset a lot of people when I say things like LeBron is significantly better than Jordan.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, I was.
No, actually, it's like overwhelmingly true.
Well, Daryl, I was going to ask you because there's a lot of kind of context important. People see extremes versus consistency, and it's hard to value that when you don't know the stats, things like that. And I run a website called the Sports Quotient, and my writers, they've argued for years that Andrei Kirilenko is better than Allen Iverson. And so that when you said Allen Iverson, I've been meaning, I wanted to ask you that. How do you value that? The sort of the extremes, the scoring extremes versus the consistency.
07, so I respect him a lot as a player. Kirilenko is the kind of player that if you have the data we have now, and even in back when he was playing most of his minutes, we didn't have the overhead camera data, which is, sort of really changed our sport, where we know where players are 25 times a second and the ball in 3 dimensions. And guys like Kirilenko definitely pop out as more valuable because they do things like getting extra possessions through their defensive impact. They rebound at a high rate, and they don't just get rebounds you'd get anyway, but the incremental rebounds in traffic and things like that. They force other teams into worse shots. They do a lot of things that, coaches and people who really watched the game saw, but maybe weren't as apparent as, a fast guy who could break someone's ankles and then pull up for a very difficult shot and make it, even though many of the time.
So he wasn't as sexy, right? It wasn't as obvious to the eye or as flashy.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the Fabiano.
Right.
That's where I was going with it.
And I was just about to kind of transition back to that. I think that you're right that a lot of the data that you would have needed then, or I'm sure there's a lot of data you have now that isn't public information because that's what you do at the Houston Rockets, and that's kind of your competitive edge. And because you know that the Caps was born out of our cheat detection, there's a lot of things that go into that we actually don't publish or actively push as much as we would in terms of information about we talk about the engine patterns and how often people do it. What are human beings throughout the entire history of chess games capable of doing? Maybe chess has a leg up there on the NBA in the sense that we have, all of this notation, right? So we're able to look back and really, really find the answers to some questions that I think fans would have. So it's a good point. But again, basketball's a team sport, so there's all the individual analytics of a player, and they're affected by a team, and that makes me wonder. I got to ask you the next question about the Pro Chess League, which yesterday we had kind of our Pro Chess League hype day, and we talked about how the Pro Chess League is the first ever team sport for chess, even though it's still an individual game. You have one-on-one, Magnus playing Hikaru, board ones for their team, but overall it's a team thing. What do you think needs to happen for chess to maybe have that type of boom where you start getting a whole bunch of teams, first of all, and then the second follow-up is when is Houston going to launch their own Pro Chess League team? So pressure on you to either host the Pro Chess League finals at the Houston Esports Arena or launch your own Pro Chess League team.
I'm open to talking about that.
Yeah.
Texas has a great history. A huge fan of the Houston Rockets is Rico Rodriguez from Modern Family, and he comes to all our games, and he actually played the kid from Brownsville, and highlighting that team, from a tough area.
Yeah.
Right on the border with Mexico, down in the Rio Grande Valley area of Texas, where our minor league team is. So that's how I actually learned about Brownsville and that. But Houston has a great chess environment. Robert here is a big advocate of pushing it at the youth levels. I think Maurice Ashley is going to come visit down here in a few weeks. I've been talking to him, so pretty exciting stuff. Susan Polgar actually came down once and worked with our team, and a couple of our players could actually play, like Trevor Ariza. So
yep.
Pretty active chess environment.
Well, I was just about to transition to that. Do you miss Trevor Ariza this year? That's the last question before we let you go, because I don't know that he's doing his best for the Suns right now.
A little bit because he's on the Suns.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, since we're technically we're supposed to avoid too much commentary.
Yeah, I was totally teasing you. Thank you. I was actually referring to his chess because you and him have talked chess. Had you missed Trevor Ariza for his chess?
I think like one of the 8th graders we played beat him. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But I was impressed though. I mean, it's not a big sport among NBA players. I think I've heard Klay Thompson plays. We probably have some others, but even the players from the Balkans area, we get a lot of players from Bosnia and Serbia and places like that. I've expected them to maybe be chess players, and I haven't found that experience. So apparently the chess boxing is a combo, but we haven't had much chess basketball as a combo.
Hey, there we go. Well, you and I will talk about that. That's the next variant to come. But all right, Daryl, this has been awesome. A treat for me and Robert as sports fans and everybody in the chat. And I think interesting comparisons and parallels, and nice to know that somebody in the non-traditional chess fan community is following the match so closely and rooting for their countrymen. So, Daryl, thank you so much.
Caruana, and shout out to Mayreen, his business managers. I know we're trying to get him on the front page like Fisher was back in the day, and appreciate it. Is this actually Josh? I just said that to be funny.
I mean,
Danny and I were arguing before, so you'll have to continue tuning in for
Yeah.
our argument that's about to take place.
I'll keep tuning in to Twitch.
Well, there's no argument about to take place now. I think we're both agreeing at this point that Magnus has kind of turned the table. So I would say it's still drawish, but now Fabiano might be fighting for one. So, but all right, everybody, follow Daryl Morey on Twitter. You can see right there. Engage with him during the World Chess Championship. Now you know that Daryl is following it closely. So give Daryl a follow and let him know your thoughts on the match. And Daryl, maybe we'll catch up with you toward the end.
Yeah.
Doesn't follow me, so I don't know. I don't know how I should feel about that.
Well, maybe we'll catch up with you toward the end, especially if it's a close match, and perhaps we'll stay in touch.
Sounds good. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks.
Good luck against the Warriors tonight.
Yeah, good luck against the Warriors. That's right. All right. Well, there you have it, everyone. Thank you to that special guest there, Daryl Morey. It's fascinating stuff, I think, to talk about sports analytics and.
Yeah.
I like the comparisons. We could probably have a whole show talking about analytics in chess versus analytics in sports, and that's like a whole nother
Right.
segment to go down. We only briefly mentioned caps, but that's because we have chess to get back to here.
And here I'm loving Magnus' position because the move pawn to b5. I would play that right now, that your pawn on b4 is going to forever be a weakness. I'm going to win that pawn soon. And once I win that pawn, that's going to be an outside pass pawn that I was talking about earlier in a slightly different variation. But that pawn on b4 is going down.
Well, and I hate the move d3 only because I feel like it's a full concession to the fact that white has nothing. Now it's official because without some opportunity to either use this extra pawn in a breakthrough way, obviously, those who've been here know I was trying to justify tactical ideas, right? Which even if they didn't work, what was the principle of what I was trying to do? Use the opportunity while you have the extra pawn before black has a clear plan to do something. But right now, it feels like Fabiano recognizing he has nothing. Of course, Carlsen has not played the move b5 yet. Perhaps he's debating between the king rush versus sticking that pawn right where it needs to be. But unfortunately, to Team Caruana fans, including our guest we just had, Daryl, I don't believe Fabiano is going to be the one pushing as white anymore.
Yeah, I just got a good question by Lancer Ulysses. But wouldn't Magnus' pawn on b5 also be a target? I'm going to say no. And the reason why it's not a target is how do you attack it?
Yeah, well, first of all, where's the light square bishop?
Right, no light square bishop. The knight can only attack from c3 or a3, but to get to c3, you have to kick the bishop out somehow. And to get to a3, well, you can't. There's a rook there. Not to mention the king from black will go to b6 at any moment to protect that pawn. So it's a very good question because sometimes you put your pawn to blockade another, but it becomes a target.
Right.
Here it's actually not
and if
targetable.
anything, it's just getting a head start on what's going to happen after rook a4 and takes. Getting a head start on that running to the b1 square, right?
Right.
Like getting your right sneakers on before you go for a long jog. Well, we're about to go for a quick break. Don't go anywhere because in a few moments we will be diving into the full spectrum of what's ahead for us in this endgame, and we'll be right back. And we are back, and apologize for that last break there, but had to say goodbye to our guest and gather ourselves for a long night here, because in a good sense, I think we are ahead for a game where maybe Magnus is pushing with black for the second time in the match, but Fabiano's still up a pawn. Maybe he pushes too hard.
Yep.
Who knows, right? Anything could happen at this point. I think that Magnus now taking his time for the first time since that opening prep caught him off guard, because I think he really wants to make sure he takes the right approach. We've seen him be slightly inaccurate already in this match, and I think he's basically deciding between two things, right? The king rush or the positional clamp.
Right.
Right? Agreed?
Absolutely. And because by playing pawn to b5, you remove that possibility for your king to get there.
Right.
And let's imagine the rooks were traded off. If we could just, in your head, just take them off the board.
Take him off the board. Everybody play with us.
So the king would rush from king b6 to b5. That's the clear intention, because the pawn on b4 is so weak.
Right.
And the way to protect it, you'd have to do something like put your knight on c2. That's a very bad square, especially because
Assuming
black,
you could even get there.
assuming you can get there without
Right.
the rooks on the board.
Right.
But the light square bishop would just start attacking it,
Right.
and my king is going to infiltrate. So
Right.
black would actually like to trade off the rooks now, and if the pawn's on b5, maybe it's a bit more difficult to get the king in, but it does keep that pawn in its place.
Well, I think b5 would be a move that maybe don't trade off the rooks just yet, right?
Oh, I would not trade.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, but no, I think that's a good point. And again, we're having this dynamic imbalance that was highlighted in Game 1 as sort of a strategic difference between the two, in big part because of Magnus Carlsen's comments in an interview that he gave to a Norwegian podcast, I believe it was, where they asked him stylistically what were big differences, and he said something that at the time sounded kind of basic, where he said, like, I prefer the bishops, Fabiano prefers the center.
Yep.
We've had 3 Rossolimos now in the match. That's this opening right here, where white is willing to give up the bishop pair in a number of different ways for a chance at a big center. Now we've seen Fabiano favor a gambit that is specifically designed to get control of the center. You're literally, it's called a wing gambit because you're sacrificing a queen side of the board to potentially get a big center, right? And then later on in this game, Robert, when there was maybe the best chance Fabiano had was the forcing opportunity to blow open the position, but with it would have came the price of maybe losing the center. Fabiano didn't do it.
Right.
And it sounds really like basic. Again, I kind of feel bad for highlighting it because I believe chess is much deeper than, and these guys are both good enough to know the center has value and the bishop has value, but it doesn't mean styles aren't influencing their decisions.
Yeah, I think actually that was too much liquidation for Fabiano.
Right, he didn't like the idea because
he didn't want to start trading all the pieces, thinking that.
But I'll play maybe something different. Maybe it's not that he didn't think this. Maybe he underestimated what your idea was. Maybe he underestimated how strong Rook A1 was, and this idea of not just running back to get the pawns.
Yeah.
Because I would argue that, I mean, okay, liquidation, one thing, but if it's the best winning chances, you'll go for it. I think maybe he played C3 under the thought that this was the best way to win, and just simply underestimated this approach from Carlsen.
Perhaps. And someone just asked in the chat, can we look at 19b5, which we did look at is a while ago now because we've been expecting this position. So instead of bishop c3, white playing b5, but we discussed that white doesn't really want to give up his bishop because once you take the knight 6, I can even take with the king, but I'd probably take with the pawn, and I win this c7 pawn next, and I have 2 bishops against 2 knights, which is generally speaking a pretty good advantage for the side with the bishop, especially in open space.
Perhaps not winning still for either player because everything almost had, but black would be pushing for sure.
Right, and we don't want to talk in such grand terms as winning, or but they give great winning chances for black in a position like that. And same with the position right now. The move pawn to b5 for black stops that pawn in its tracks. And it's not that black is completely winning right now. This isn't game 1. This reminds me some of game 3, where with the black pieces, Magnus Carlsen was much better, and then Fabiano, in time trouble, still managed to escape. But at the same time, here, black is down a pawn, but will regain that pawn. And if that pawn is regained, that b4 pawn, that is an outside pass pawn. And the reason why that is so important, I mentioned that term a bunch, is that it takes so much longer for the white king to go stop it. When the pawn's on the outside of the board, you have to really redirect yourself all the way to the flank, and most of the action is not on that side of the board, it's in the center.
And a lot of times past pawns, I think, are misinterpreted. Yes, we want to push them and hopefully get a queen, but even if you don't achieve that goal, often what makes them so effective is the trouble they cause the opponent in having to stop them. And so decoy, right? Okay, yeah, well, I think, like we said, the reason Magnus hasn't moved both since our break and from this position now is because I think this is a big moment. He wants to decide if I fully commit to b5 and take away this route of the king, am I sure, right, I can win this pawn? because there are lines that as passive as they look, white just buckles down. I think in the end you do have things like bishop f8, but you're worried about this.
Right.
So then you have f6 to consider, right? So I mean, again, I think that we are both like all of you kind of waiting to see what Magnus decides, but my guess is that's the critical decision that's trying to be made. And I think Fabiano's going to start to get not desperate, but he's going to have to start to look for ways to simplify.
Right.
One idea that keeps coming back into mind will be knight to g5 with ideas of f4 and get the knight out to d2. It's really irritating if you're in a position where you're trying to defend on the queen side and all you have is passive moves like this.
Right. Maybe rook a2 instead of rook a4 is another option.
I was even thinking rook a3 because even if you kind of think you're losing a tempo, you're asking a tough question. What do you want to do here, right? And if you force a move like rook c1, your idea that you mentioned earlier, bishop h6 keeps coming to mind.
So play f6 first, then try to play for
do you even have to? Is there knight takes e5?
Bishop e5 is a free pawn.
Oh, the knight's pinned. Okay,
right.
yeah. Okay, so f6 first with the threat of this. I was looking at knight takes.
Right. So maybe king b6 instead of f6. Same idea.
King b6. Okay, same idea.
To get your king out of harm's way.
Right. Get your king out of harm's way so that this can be an aggressive threat.
Yep. And even after knight g5, once again, bishop h6 is still a move.
So this is why I was saying that maybe white wants to do something more aggressive now, whether black plays b5 or not, because that's nobody's favorite thing to do. You will buckle down and just try to play brick wall defense if you absolutely have to, but best defense is a good offense if you can make it so.
So is it time, Danny, for you to admit that what we were talking about earlier, when I was saying that black had the good, Magnus was the one pushing for a win, you were saying that...
I thought I already did.
I know, but I really want it to be like a full-on, I'm sorry, you were right.
I'm sorry. Well, I mean, love means never having to say you're sorry.
Yeah.
And you love me, and I love you. So
and
I'm not sorry.
You. I forgive you.
And I accept that. You're also not supposed to have to forgive me.
But forgiveness should be spoken sometimes.
That's true. And it is good. Forgiveness is divine, right?
Yeah.
No, but seriously, I think that my biggest disappointment was just that there wasn't something to do before this plan is about to ensue.
He went king b6, and I'm actually...
You're not thrilled with Magnus's decision?
So after d3, king b6. I mean, I like it because instead of b5, he went king b6 here. So that's been played.
I know. I was thinking that best chance. Maybe. So you still think b5 was better?
I still like b5. And the king on b6, I'm worried about, what if just bishop d2? Because my king can't continue running up the board, because then knight c3 will come with check, and all of a sudden that's annoying. And now that bishop can go to e3 with check, doesn't seem like the biggest deal.
Right, but if you get this follow-up, and the king might get himself a little bit of trouble, right?
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
But maybe bishop d2, I guess rook d8 is... You can switch. You mentioned that before. You can just go from the b pawn to the d pawn. So if bishop d2, rook to d8, and now all of a sudden that pawn on d3 is feeling very vulnerable. But maybe that's... kind of switcheroo here is a good possibility.
I really like bishop d2.
But I mean, I guess how do you respond to rook d8 is the question, right? Because here, once this rook comes to d8,
I was going with your idea, check.
Check.
So I could either free this square, or depending on where you move the king.
So I guess the question is, can I move my king up?
Right, that would be obviously what you'd want. I would love to play something like bishop c5 and then check, but it looks like you take in time.
Right. Cut your knight off.
And cut my knight off from either one of these squares. Okay. So if this check can occur...
And I wonder if I can just keep taking.
Just keep moving, right? Yeah. The king is a far cry from home, but maybe it doesn't matter.
And maybe knight d5 check is a possibility, and white is now actually in the process of trading off many pawns because knight
actively
d5 check.
Trying for a draw. There's also going back to d2 now that the king has come up so far.
But then my king will run back home to c5.
Yeah, bishop d2, king
and then maybe
c5,
rook b1.
rook
I mean,
b1.
But the d3 is hanging. It's sort of a mixed bag there.
Yeah. You don't want to get yourself mated, and it looks like you take this pawn just in time to have the c4 square.
And you can go back to d6. I'm not afraid of retreating. I know when I've gone too far.
Yep. So this would be maybe the kind of lines Magnus is calculating. Maybe as much as b5 is the way to, cement the weakness, he decides that now's the time.
Yep.
Maybe he can run in, steal the pawn, and get back home.
Yeah, I don't know, because, again, rook d8 is such a logical move, threatening that pawn on d3, but perhaps keeping that b pawn for the moment is more valuable to white.
Yeah.
I don't know, bishop d2 does look... I don't see another move, really, because this knight d2 moves feel very uncomfortable in many of the variations here.
Yeah, especially because I lack another square.
Right.
Right. There's no follow up to
Right.
knight d2.
And
so,
now
I mean,
king
maybe
b5
just
is-
king b5.
Exactly,
Right?
it's a
And
safer
now
square.
where's my progress?
Exactly.
So I also hate that move.
Bishop d2 just frees up a lot of squares, very important squares for white's pieces.
Right, but like you said, white now has to worry about black flipping the script. Forget about b4. d3 is also weak. So
Yep.
white's up a pawn, but they're much weaker than any pawns black has.
Can
And
you keep the pawn though? So bishop d2, rook d8. Let's say after bishop e3 check, right? Can I even go king c7 potentially?
I don't know why you would go away from the
Well,
line.
because I'm going
you
to
did.
take your pawn with my knight, or your d3 pawn. Right? Your 2 pawns are under attack at the same time. I'm not
Right.
entirely sure you protect both.
Yeah, I think this is the first
And then
try.
knight b4.
Right.
It's piling up pressure on this. And okay,
Perhaps we're just choosing ways for white to get an advantage. I mean, sorry, for black to get an advantage at this point.
but I feel like something just kind of my visceral reaction is that
Maybe
white
rook
should
c1 here.
maybe.
That might be a reason not to go backward. I mean, something feels counterintuitive to me to go backward after you commit
Yeah.
to this. I feel like Magnus probably did this because he calculated he can do the first line, which is go in and take the pawn.
But the line that really concerned me from black's move is the knight c3 check and the knight d5 check. Just sort of give.
Just trading into a draw.
Yeah, you take with the rook. Should rook b1 check, win b7, and after that f7 is a target. So even if you take my pawn d3, which you probably should with your rook, I just make left for my king, right? So rook takes d3, I go
H3 or
or
something.
something, and
Right.
then you're
Right.
having a very difficult time continuing to protect the
Right.
f7 pawn.
Well, I was looking maybe, and then you have moves like knight d8. But,
Yes, so knight d8,
right,
just to go a
guarding.
couple moves, I'll check you on c7, and so the b1 and knight g5.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to trade everything off.
White's on the draw path. Path to draw. Those kind of variations are awfully dramatic.
Dramatic indeed.
Okay, so where are we at with the live position? The king is on b6, and I think that variations like that, while most likely none of them end up occurring on the board, again, they're variations that these players are calculating and thinking about in regards to the critical decision here. But, so again, the question becomes then, where did the game really slip for Fabiano? Do-over, mulligan. You get one mulligan per world championship match. Not sure if you do that. You get to say, I'm taking back 5 moves. No, I'm kidding. So when did that happen, right?
When did
We talked about d4.
right? I think
Maybe-
that was
I think
maybe
that
the
was
moment.
key.
But this all leads me.
It doesn't mean White was going to win. It just means like now that you're not only not winning but fighting for a
Right.
draw. That's a big switch.
right, and even if it's not the hardest fight you've ever had, it's just you're the one who needs to prove that you're going to hold. rather
That's
than
what I'm
making,
saying. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you don't ever want no one likes when their opponent is playing for 2 results.
Right.
And you're hoping for a draw.
Right.
Right. And so it's maybe a little extreme to say that just yet, but it looks like Magnus is the one pushing for that.
And I see someone asking about bishop b2 here, Vamp Hager. But bishop b2 runs right into ideas like rook to a2. So you're giving me a tempo to attack your bishop. Your pawn on b4 is still going to be under
Yeah, if your
attack.
king was on b5,
right.
right? But no forks. And
It's sort of a needed tempo. Maybe rook e2 is the response, actually, here.
rook e2?
Yeah.
I guess you do have a weird check, right?
Oh, no, but my
wait,
bishop
you don't.
protects
The
it.
bishop- Yeah, okay.
So then I can just go knight takes b4 now and just collect.
Collect. Paying the rent. Collect what's due. Somebody in the Chess TV chat just asked for knight f to d2 in the live position. That's a move we haven't considered yet.
But the problem with that is the knight b1's still stuck, right?
Right.
And what's the next move? I guess knight c4 check is an option.
I mean, I still feel like
Yeah,
Magnus
king
played this
b5.
for a reason, so let's do
But
it.
then, and now if you go bishop b2, I'll just take your pawn on b4, a knight, because now my e5 pawn's no longer hanging.
So the one reason why moving this knight may come back into ideas are if you can get f4 because of the pin, but in situations where knight takes b4 is threatened, d3 is weak, I have a hard time believing that this is
Just knight takes b4, like you said,
a good result. Yeah, I mean you'd almost have to take here now.
which is not what you
Not
want
what
to do.
you want. You do not want to give up the bishop pair.
Especially with this passed b pawn that's just going to be
Yep.
rolling down the board.
Yep, and a just brilliantly active king. So back to one other idea we had. Now that you're not getting knight takes b4 just yet, is there one last chance that we can make something like this work?
So bishop a2.
Bishop all the way in, and I go for f4 under
go
the
for
idea that
f6 again.
Boy, I would love to play knight e6.
You would love that,
I
wouldn't you?
would love that.
But now just I'll take on f4 and
Knight
say,
f3.
you can have your strong center, but I'm going
Right.
to win the b4 pawn next. I'm even in
And
material.
and now you've got the kind of material advantage that's enough to win over here. Should all of this clear?
Which
Right.
it won't even clear, but yes, you're right.
Yep.
And that's the thing is like, we talked about this position before. It's like this looks nice for white because you have the strong center. D4 can happen,
Right.
but D5. I'll just move my knight away. I'm not super threatened by your passed pawn because it's easy to blockade.
Right. It's a
Position
central
is.
pawn too. It's not nearly as useful as what we've
Right.
been highlighting all day, which is that the reason Magnus would have winning chances if he can gather this b pawn safely is he has an outside passer away from the white king,
Oh.
a long journey.
Yeah, and I just see that Lucky Label is coming up with a nice tactic in the current position, in the game position, that if bishop b2, rook a2, there's knight c3 immediately.
Oh, very nice fork. We didn't see that. Yeah, now you can't take here because of this.
That's some trickery.
Forky mode. Okay,
So-
but bishop b2. First, before I come up with the reason why it doesn't work, it feels so bad to
Right.
play the bishop to b2. I mean, it makes sense. Tactically, you're saying you can't take with the knight because e5 hangs, although there's d3, so let's get into it.
And what's white's next move, actually?
Yeah, I mean, it feels so wrong. It just feels wrong. If playing bishop b2 is right, I don't want to be right. I mean, that's how it feels.
Yep.
Although that was a nice tactic.
Maybe
Nice
rook d8 is possible. Just pile up on the
again,
d3
flipping
pawn.
back to this. I keep
Yeah, rook
wondering
d8
if
looks
black
good.
could just get away with f6 right away, too.
You probably could.
You
I just
don't
wanna
want
allow-
d4, right? You don't
Precisely.
want to, yeah. So
But
the
rook
reason you
d8
don't just overprotect to free up this bishop is because probably white strikes. So that's just a note for everyone wondering. But
Well, and now we're actually rook d8. How do you protect the d3 pawn? Because if you have rook d1, I go bishop b3.
sorry, which line again?
Rook d8 now. You
Right.
can't even protect your d3 pawn.
Right.
Bishop b3 happens, rook d2,
Okay.
and after bishop b3, rook d2, you bishop h6. I just keep harassing your rook.
Pesky
You're losing.
bishops.
Yes.
Yep.
It's not. It's
Yeah,
bishop
rook
d2.
d8 seems interesting.
Bishop d2 somehow feels more right than bishop b2.
Well, that was the line we were, because it would be the logical conclusion of trying to go somewhere different, given that you've already been on this diagonal.
Yeah.
And bishop b2, I guess, in theory, stops king b5 because of knight c3 and knight d5. That was the point?
Well, I'm not even sure that really stops it.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking with that skeptical tone.
Right.
Because I'm curious.
We ju-
What exactly does bishop b2 do to stop the plan?
Well, rook d8 was what we were just talking
Oh, yeah,
about.
so rook d8 too, and I was just going with the principled plan of Magnus just played king b6, so let's go full steam ahead
Yep.
until white proves otherwise. I mean, okay, there were ideas we were looking at like this, which would be irritating. The knight is clearly much better on d5 than it was on b1. But I've managed to win that extra pawn.
Great comment I see there in the Chess.com TV chat. Thanks for refuting the 4-year-old's suggestions. Apparently, Ice Cool Pool son suggested rook d1 there. That was a refutation to that. Didn't even see the immediate message. But
Well, first of all, if you have a 4-year-old making suggestions, either way, it's a win. So, but yeah, thanks for tuning in and with your 4-year-old.
Yep.
All
So
right,
bishop
there
d2
we
played.
go. Bishop d2 is played. I'm expecting things to go right back to d1. I mean, sorry, to d8, given that was kind of the plan we talked about.
Yep.
Magnus is very relaxed.
Yeah, some of the photos we've seen, very, very relaxed Magnus.
Back to playing for 2 results. What's up, Andy? Shout out to Andy Jessup, one of our awesome developers, hanging out in the Chess TV chat. Huge chess fan. So, good evening there from wherever you are in France. I forget, some amazing place you live.
Let's see, what can black do? Another option that we didn't discuss before is knight to d4, I guess. I was just thinking about it. If the
Yeah.
knight takes on d4.
My knight on b1 is just so stuck.
Yep.
Right? You're actually threatening things like rook a1 and bishop a2.
Because your knight can't move.
Yeah.
And now
And
the
I
king
can't
can
even move the bishop to free up a square because now I can't move my knight due to a penny mode. More problems. So knight d4 is interesting. I
Yeah,
agree.
and the thing is, knight d4 looks like it cedes control of the center, right? Because after knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, it looks like all of a sudden white has this 4-on-3 advantage of it on the king side, which you do, but with this knight stuck on b1, you're not very happy about. So I think taking on d4 might be the wrong move, but what what else can we do? We can go knight c3, I guess. Knight c3. Do I just want to take on f3 and ruin your structure? Then play rook d8? This d3
Yeah,
pawn
this
is
D3
still...
pawn is just hasn't been my favorite pawn for so long. Although you do have bishop c3 coming now, I guess, right? You're getting a little bit of unwind.
Oh, true.
Oh, sorry,
Bishop
not
E-
bishop c3, bishop e3.
Bishop e3 will be very helpful. They go rook d1 and then protect. And
Yeah.
the king can't go to b5 anymore. The knight on c3, so maybe rook a3 is to
Right.
keep everything stuck on their tracks.
But okay, this is if knight d4 is an idea. I'm not sure that we should go away from anything that was straightforward that we already analyzed, the rook coming to d8.
Well, here we were thinking, was it bishop e3? Was that what we were talking about? Just making black's life a little bit more difficult. Or maybe knight c3 here as well. That's where knight c3 takes knight a4 check. Throw that knight to c5. Now b7's under attack, then the rook, the bishop. I actually don't even know where that rook should go there.
Okay.
You also don't have to go king b5 after knight a4 check. So it's another thing to keep in mind. After rook takes d3 and knight a4, you can just drop your king back to c7. Say,
Right.
good for you to get your knight to c5. It doesn't win the b7 pawn.
But and you're right, black is still in good shape here because he's won his pawn back cleanly, and white trying to coordinate. But
I think white's actually doing...
yeah, white,
totally
but maybe
fine.
white getting enough counterplay that would be okay. So that means we're back to wondering what is Magnus going to do on bishop d2. So we decided that coming forward in the most aggressive possible fashion, probably not good, not even because knight d5 check right away, but things like this
Right.
are just too risky for that king. And you're saying rook d8 is also met by knight c3 with a quick flip to this side of the board and some counterplay.
Yeah.
b5, rook c1, knight c5, etc.
Yep.
So, okay. So how is Magnus playing the position now? Maybe he's back to wondering, why didn't I listen to Robert and play b5? Do you think he asked himself that?
I don't think he listens to me. So.
I bet Robert said b5. That's what he said.
Well, it's interesting because this ideas with rook d8 taking d3. We were talking before about how black stayed down a pawn and got quick counterplay, quick initiative, had better pieces. That's what leads me to think knight d4 is an option because I keep my rook on the open file. I don't care about the pawn on d3 yet. I think it's a weakness and you can't do too much with it yet. So knight to d4, that's why I'm considering, because after knight to c3, actually, what's white's next move? Like, if I don't take on f3 and leave my knight there, are you really going to take me on d4? Maybe. But I'm not entirely sure that's the best idea option. So,
Well, better than it was before, obviously, because before we were getting the rook
Right.
to a1 and pin. But
so rook a3 here, for example, is a possibility.
Right.
And rook c1, I think.
Rook c1, knight takes d4.
Well, knight d4 I'll just take back.
Well, rook c1, you should be worried about tactics
That's
on
what I was
d2.
about to go into.
Yeah.
But knight d4, if we look at that first,
Okay.
pawn takes d4.
Now the problem is d3's falling in the end of all these lines.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, so rook to c1, but obviously this tactic doesn't necessarily win material because you can take with the rook.
And then knight e2 check. f1, take on c3, take, and now your e5 pawn's hanging. That's a real problem.
Right.
Because you want to go king b5 and just go after the b4 pawn.
But you can. If you have to play this, then d4 comes.
Right.
So.
But you always have to be aware of these tactics with knight e2 check.
Yep.
With rook a3,
Exactly.
rook c1, I don't have to take on c3. I'll just leave the pieces as they are, and maybe... well, actually... yeah, so if knight d4...
Let's talk a little about this. If Fabiano, let's say he holds this again, I mean, we're still looking big advantage Carlsen because of the two whites coming up.
oh, yeah, in the match, yes.
I mean, I'm talking in
Yes.
the match, right?
Yeah.
How long did it take him to get his first victory versus Vichy and Chennai? I don't remember.
That was the first one they played?
Yeah, the first match. Ultimately, the score was 6.5, 3.5. But okay, one of the victories happened with a bit of a desperate try for Vichy later on in that match. But I'm trying to remember. We're gonna look that up.
Yeah,
real
I
quick
have
and
a computer
try
in
to
front of me
remember.
that I will...
Just drawing parallels to what might be
Game
inside
5.
the players' heads. Game 5.
Anyone
So
with the white
this was
pieces.
it right here, right? And every other one of, I guess, besides Karyakin. Karyakin's match was all draws.
And so every other's just one match then?
Yes. So yeah. There's two. It was two matches against Vichy.
Right, and you said in one of them he didn't win until game 5, and he
Right.
had the white pieces.
Yeah.
The first one he won in game... Wait,
So I mean, okay, it's not atypical for there to be a bunch of draws in these
Yeah.
World Championship matches. But you wonder how that plays into the psychology if you start to get a little bit frustrated and impatient. Carlsen ultimately lost to Caruana in a game where he overpushed.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's in danger of doing that like here or in this match yet. And maybe that's why he didn't win game 1, right? Was nervous about converting on an advantage he had earned. But just start to wonder, how it's going to affect things later on as we sit here and try to foreshadow the tempo of the match. But all right, well, a lot of comments coming in. Diamond member, J, lots of U's and an X in the username. Not even going to try to pronounce that. Says he doesn't see any immediate threats for black after knight d4. But I think the point, though, that Robert's making, I mean, I'm agreeing with Robert here. We're all over the place today, is that, okay, black doesn't have any concrete threats. We agree with that. But I guess the other thing is,
What's white?
What's white doing, right? Sometimes you win games. Sometimes you win games by letting your opponent suffer in a bad position, whether you have a concrete plan to win it or not. But Alex Yermolinsky, now posting there, Grandmaster, been active today in the Chess TV chat. Thanks for being with us, Alex. He says that he believes Bishop d2 is a really strong move. And it's funny because we saw that move earlier, but I think the line when we first looked at it that kind of dismissed it, I think we were looking at things like rook d8 and kind of assuming that the d3 pawn was a problem. I don't know that we fully appreciated this opportunity, right, to sacrifice the pawn back and get counterplay.
Right.
And again, I'm just trying to think in hindsight, what was it about Bishop d2 that maybe we didn't understand was there for white. We perhaps underestimated that.
Right.
Well, Archimedes Chess now responding to Alex in the chat saying, well, it seems like rook d8 is likely an easy draw for white. I don't even know who you're saying should be going for an easy draw, though, because kind of the point of Robert's line I'll give again is that this is actually kind of really irritating for black. And this would be an example of a line we talked about. Carlsen, maybe he has to go for it, but you don't really want to take an unhealthy pawn and then suddenly be in a position where white is the one pressing with the initiative, whether it's threats of b5 or knight c5 or these sort of things.
Yeah, you probably move your king up to b5 and, say, okay, you'll put your knight on c5, my rook will go to a3 perhaps. And, at some point you'll win b7, but I can go bishop f8, and your knight on b7 is not the greatest piece, but it's looking like, oh, actually this is a very direct plan. So if knight takes b7, bishop f8, and you can go knight c5 back, so you don't, or knight a5
we're just
actually,
heading
one of
for
these
a
moves.
draw. Ooh, that's a nice
Well, then
move.
knight takes b4 actually. That's probably not a good move. But
Okay.
knight c5, saying, please take.
And you kind of want to take here, not b4, because I'm taking here.
right.
So, likely looks drawish, as Daryl said. Best way to sound like a pro chess commentator is say things like looks drawish. Okay, the other idea is to take here. If you really want to, this makes me feel like I might risk losing, though.
Yes.
So
that's the thing is, even if you scoop up 2 pawns, the h and the e6 pawn, if you
the
lose
b
that
pawn
b4
might
pawn,
still be the strongest one on the board.
right. And not to mention
Right.
knight g5 runs right into bishop h6, just pinning that knight in very annoying fashion. So you have to be careful before doing something like that. But
Nelson Moore says Carlsen BG4 sounds like a beer. It's like some kind of like obscure. I don't know why I found that funny.
well, it's great that Yermo's in the chat because he's doing all those recaps, right? So
yeah, well, Yermo is his goal is of course to bring you the daily recap, like we said on YouTube, on Chess.com, on Twitch, pretty much as soon as he can, and so. I know he's been watching our live coverage every day, and this is maybe the first time he's really decided to dive into the chat. But that way he has analysis. He has all of our blunders to combine with his analysis to turn around the best video.
now I was gonna say Prabhat7 in the Twitch chat said I want Robert to play the next candidates, and I'm like, I don't want Robert to play the next candidates because if you threw me in there, I'd just get crushed.
First of all, Robert belongs right here. Right here with us.
Yeah.
Okay, Rook G8 was played. So, so we have the move that we initially predicted as what would be the problem with Bishop to D2, but we've come around to feeling like, okay, White has that opportunity. We said that one thing you have to do when you're up a pawn is not be married to it, not be so loyal to the materialism, right?
Yep.
Robert and I were joking about that earlier. You have to be willing to let your advantage evolve. So, hey, if White finds a way to quickly do something and give back what is now the most obviously weakest pawn on the board, if he can do that and not lose the b pawn, that's what he wants. The real problem, and the reason why Robert has liked Black's chances for a while, is that the problem is you're probably going to lose back that extra pawn and still be the one with the most obvious target, that being the b4 pawn. But what Fabian wants to do to prove that wrong is to try to get some counterplay. So again, we've been looking at lines like this, where if you don't want me to win your healthy pawn for my weak pawn, with knight to c5, applying forks everywhere, then you have to go back. But now the initiative is ensuing for white, and now you maybe wish you didn't do this, right? Because here now white has given back that d pawn, and again, if you're missing the point of rook c1, I'm threatening b5, and there's no easy way to deal with it because you're kind of not happy with the other threats that are in the position too.
Yeah, and I think that white now has two very decent looking options. In the start position, you have either knight to c3, as we were just looking at, or bishop e3 check. We were talking about that line before, right? Bishop e3, king b5, knight c3 check. This looks like that white is getting out of this without any.
The other move I only just saw now, but it's okay. It's no good. Never mind. I was looking at rook d1 with the idea that you can't take as a check, and I thought if you play this, I would throw in this intermezzo.
Right.
But I think you just go here, and I'm too slow.
Yeah, you're losing the b4 pawn.
Yeah, losing the b4 pawn. Okay. So.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
likely no reason to play rook d1, bishop e3, or knight c3.
I think bishop e3 is just like one of those really safe moves, and just if you see that, you can just throw your knight to d5, start trading all these pawns, and you're definitely not going to lose a position like that. If you're Fabiano, you might go for it, but it really depends how he's feeling. Because just a couple moves ago, we started like black, and now all of a sudden, white's position's not looking so poor. In which case, maybe the trajectory of the game says for Caruana, hey, maybe I can try to see if the knight c3 to a4 to c5 line is a bit more tricky and can give me some chances to outplay Magnus. But I don't see it, really. I think that, as we've seen throughout most of the match, we have yet to see Fabiano really outplay Magnus. And we've seen Magnus make some mistakes. We've seen Fabiano play some great chess, some great preparation. But I've yet to see in sort of a neutral position like we saw in Game 3, for example, when it was about level position, Magnus outplayed him. It got a slight advantage. We're talking with Ifan for a long time about it. And then Fabiano held the draw. And here it looks like, okay, it's most likely, with proper play, going to liquidate into drawish territory. But I've yet to see Fabiano really kind of come after Magnus in any meaningful way.
Yeah. Good point. If Fabiano finds a way to coordinate and get active enough to justify losing back the extra pawn, probably all it means is not going to be groveling for a draw, like you're saying, right? Not like we're flipping the script back the other way, because we don't want Robert to say that maybe I was right. No, I'm kidding. I know. But
you are sometimes. Just
it doesn't matter. Being wrong or right, we've got the game continuing here, and I think there's going to be both sides trying to push here for a little bit and giving us something to think about. So we've actually got a Photoshop contest up on Twitter right now for those of you who want to get involved. Pretty fun to see that Magnus Carlsen is relaxed, and he's got swagger. The way he dresses, Magnus, right?
Yep.
But we're wondering what you think he's thinking. So let's give away a diamond membership for those of you who come up with the best, most maybe playful, most serious, whatever you think. Give us something that is fancy, schmancy, and fun enough to have us show here on the live show, and we'll give you a diamond membership.
Probably thinking about how the Warriors are playing the Rockets tonight.
I think the Warriors are playing the Rockets tonight. I wonder what Daryl thought about the game, right? But we actually did have anyway, it was a funny dynamic because, never mind. Daryl wanted to invite Magnus, and so I helped like set up the conversation, and then after all this work, and it was really appreciated, he was like, yeah, I'm already going, because Klay Thompson had invited him to the game.
Nice. Nice.
That broke Daryl's heart, I'm going to tell you.
But
because he was clearly there for the Warriors.
It kind of goes to show, though, the international influence of Magnus, right? And I think, it's
exactly.
Now's the best time to pull up maybe his player card and talk a little about his history, because, if he's going to Warriors
what's made
games,
him the global superstar that he is, right?
Yeah. And, he's getting invites from Klay Thompson, as we see here. Well, his year this year has been quite decent. He gained 1 FIDE point to this to now,
overall.
And he actually went up to 2840s, went down a little bit.
And I still find that so funny because there's been all the talk about Caruana being on a different trajectory than Magnus, and Magnus still gained a rating point.
He's been completely fine, but he he won Taught to Steal with Geary, 9 out of 13. That's incredible. He won the Gashima Memorial, and he shared first with Caruana and Levon Aronin, who's one of Daryl Morey's favorite players. And look at
this is what leads to the global star getting invited to NBA playoff games by the competing teams.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, world number 1 since 2010. His highest rating 2882. I mean, he's just a monster. Look at that. And here, Fabiano, no slouch either. He's had a great year, gained many rating points, won the candidates to qualify for here, and he's won multiple tournaments. I mean, I think he's won more tournaments than we can even list there, including a great showing, tie for first in the Olympiad for the U.S. team. So Fabiano was born in Miami, grew up in Brooklyn. He and I shared the coach, Miran Sher. We had Bruce Pandolfini on in Game 2, who was his childhood coach before Miran, and, well, he's crossed 2,800 4 years ago, so not bad.
Oh, I like this. And this is one of the things that makes this is not a quote he gave in the press conference. This is a quote that he was famous for saying, I believe a couple of years ago, that contrary to many young colleagues, I do believe that it makes sense to study the classic, and kind of referring to like the engine age, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people just relying on prep with engines and let me try to memorize chess. And I think Magnus has proven chess is not dead. You can't memorize it, but if you understand the principles that our forefathers have taught us, you can outplay people in equal positions.
Yep.
Fabiano, here's an interesting quote. I mostly try to approach tournaments as an individual. If I have success, of course, I'd like to share it with the United States. So obviously, the hype behind Fabiano is this is the first American challenging for the world title since Bobby Fischer, and I think he's there focused on the X's and O's because you also don't want to lose when you have all that hype behind you. I don't think Fabiano's afraid to lose. I think he struggles sometimes to find himself as far as how to approach Magnus, but Fabiano knows he's got a lot of people behind him.
Yeah, he certainly does. And, well, we've talked about this when you talk about first world championship challenger since Fischer. We talk about Gadakomsky because there was, he played that match against Karpov. But, yes, for all intents and purposes, for a unified championship.
First American-born.
Yes, and for a unified championship as well,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Since Fischer. And Caruana's giving Magnus, that's the thing, he's giving Magnus his all. He's so far drawn all 4 games. He looks like he's on the path to drawing this game as well. I just don't feel like he's putting Magnus under much pressure. And that's the thing. Once you're under pressure a lot, eventually...
And I tip my hat to the approach today, though. I mean, I appreciated the B4 challenge, right? And, I mean, it was even regardless of where this game goes, and I still think we have plenty of fight left, so I don't think anybody should be thinking that either player is not trying to come up with something here, right? So there's still going to be opportunities, and remember, time pressure plays a part. So regardless of what we're sitting here saying from like the removed, unbiased perspective, we have 20 moves left to be made and only about 30 minutes for each player. So we'll see if that plays a part in it. But I think you're right. I think that regardless of the approach today with B4, still not getting as much as he wants as White. Maybe now the prediction that he'll leave the Rossolimo behind will finally come true. But he's not going to get White again until Game 8.
Yes. So
we'll have plenty of time to speculate what Fabiano does there, and I don't think we need to yet because this game still has plenty left.
And he was clearly motivated to try to win because B4 is a move that you play to try to defeat your opponent, not try to get into a rook end game.
Right.
Sadly for him...
You may get a rook ending.
Yeah, he did get a rook ending, right? Like, his preparation was sort of wishful in that sense. It was like, I'm playing this line that hopefully Magnus doesn't know, and it's interesting. It's sort of double-edged. If he tries to keep the pawn, maybe he can get in some trouble. But Magnus did everything right. I got to give credit to Magnus here. I give credit to Fabiano for coming up with a unique approach, but I give credit to Magnus for just being so confident in his opening to go back to the Rossolimo time and time again and say, I'm not really getting too bad of a position. I'm holding with relative ease. Let's keep going back to my trusted weapon.
Well, plus, unlike too bad of a position in positions where you don't really have a dynamic fight, one of the advantages of the Sicilian as compared to some of the more, let's say, prepped out lines of E5, double king pawn, is there's usually an imbalance like the one you see on the board, bishop pair versus pawn structure, bishop pair versus center, that allows you to have a difference of philosophy than your opponent and therefore outplay them.
Yeah.
Right? Static equality is symmetrical equality, which not to say that you can't win those positions, but it's a different type of game, right? Magnus is very well known for embracing a style where, okay, maybe the eval says I'm slightly worse, but I don't care because who executes on their plan is actually better in this imbalance. The bishop pair, and the pressure I have versus the extra pawn or better center. So that's different approaches you can have in a chess game overall. And I think we've seen a lot of that. So even though the results have all been draws, we've seen a lot of that chess in this match, which has been nice. I mean, against Karyakin, we had all double king pawn until, I fell asleep. No, I'm kidding. No, it was good. It was a different match, right?
Very different.
And so even though there's still been a lot of draws similar to the 2016 battle versus Karyakin in New York, this is a different match. So.
And to be fair to Caruana, it's not like Magnus has done anything with the white pieces either. Right.
No, so Caruana's prep with black been good.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it just seems like they're, sort of playing well or better with the black piece than they are with the white pieces. Both.
But and this, I feel like we've had this conversation every day. It comes around to me kind of asking Robert to expand upon as the GM here between us on something that I kind of already agree with and know the answer to. Is this just a sign of modern chess? And the answer is it kind of is, right? It's kind of easier to prep your way to equality than it is to prove an advantage against preparation that allows not only a team of seconds but a lot of computers to tell you exactly what's going on, right?
But I do think it's also Magnus figuring out Fabiano to a degree, because not that Magnus is solved, right? He's capable of playing anything in any game, but he's played 3 World Championship matches prior to this one.
Right.
This is Fabiano's first championship match, and Fabiano himself said this is different. And then he had some interview after the first game. He's like, well, after I'm sitting into things, it's just chess. But your match strategy is much different than playing in a typical tournament where you may rely on your standard weapons, but when you play the same person over and over and over again, typically you like to change, at least Magnus does, and it makes him hard to pin down. But Fabiano's going to the same opening every time.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that Magnus is using a bit of time to figure out Fabiano as a challenger, and he's doing a good job with the black pieces. With white, he really needs to push more. And we saw in Game 4, Magnus was upset with himself for not actually trying to... Not that he wasn't trying, but he didn't achieve a legitimate advantage to press into a win. Instead, he allowed Fabiano to equalize, to neutralize, without too much difficulty.
To answer your question, Zugzwong99, Diamond member in the chat, there is no link to that challenge. Get involved on Twitter. Use the hashtag ChessTV to get involved in either the daily question, where we're also giving away a Diamond membership for maybe some of the best creative answers, but you can also get involved in our Photoshop contest to tell us what's inside Magnus Carlsen's head. There you have it right there. That's the daily question. Same thing. So if you're not a tweeter, first of all, no judgment. In fact, congratulations, and give yourself a pat on the back. You've avoided one social media platform in this lifetime. But if you are a tweeter and you want to get involved in either the daily question or our Photoshop contest right now for fun, go ahead and do so. Got to get involved on Twitter. Use the hashtag ChessTV. We have a move. We have liftoff. We have bishop to e3 check, I believe.
Yep.
Bishop to e3 check. Played on the board. Played on the analysis board. So not knight c3. And I actually like that, regardless of what happens here. I think that that's the most aggressive approach from the perspective that he obviously just spent, 10, 12 minutes? Clearly calculating the most forcing line. So whether Magnus goes for this or not, what Fabiano's saying with this move, bishop e3, everyone, is he thinks he has enough on king b4. Is it a simple enough, meaning knight d5 liquefying, or is it something else, right? Is it something tricky we were trying to speculate to try to take advantage of the king being overextended? I don't think so. You highlighted the king can probably just run back. But the move bishop e3 is suggestive that that's what he was thinking about on his clock, as he's ready to deal with this.
Right, and so king b5 has to be the move. As you mentioned before, king c7 is moving backwards.
And you just don't want to...
Yeah, you give white some active play that otherwise he would not get. So by doing that, by playing king b5, knight c3 check, we've talked about this several times, are there any other moves for white? Not that
Besides
I'm seeing.
knight d5.
Because you're going to lose the d3 pawn. And
yeah, like the way you would do that is something like this. You're just trying to say, I'm gonna try to take advantage of this king on this square. You don't have a queen on the board, but it doesn't mean you may not be able to get some counterplay. But the more I look at it, I doubt that. But I'm just
because the d3 pawn is hanging. Right. I'm always going to just capture that.
Yep.
And okay, now your knight's under attack. You can play bishop d2, but the thing is, without queens on the board, the black king's not so afraid of getting checkmated.
And you're even just laughing in the face of danger here.
That's what I was about to say. Where are you going to mate me? Right? You have knight move for discovery. You don't have any great move. I'll just keep moving my king back.
Yep. Agreed. So it'll be interesting. So is there anything else on king b5 besides what we're talking about with knight c3?
I think most other moves will probably get you into more trouble than it's worth. I could take on b4 with the knight if you allow me to. I really want to do to put more pressure.
And we already highlighted, for anybody wondering now, stop him from taking first, that this just doesn't work. Because when you take here, you guard both of these squares and eliminate the knight getting developed.
Right.
So that's kind of why I like the whole knight c3 thing before bishop e3, but obviously Fabiano has calculated and decided that there's something else he wants to do here.
Yeah, I think Magnus just make sure that his king's not getting checkmated by going to b5, and by putting the king on b5, you're potentially putting the king in harm's way. At least it seems that way. You don't want your king so advanced. Yes, you do in the end game, but there are 3 minor pieces in a row.
Right, that's the balance, right? In those, what is the word for those? Half middle game, half end game, hybrid. You know? No, I wonder if there's like we should invent like a chess term.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with them right now.
You know, it's like a werewolf man, vampire endgame. I don't know. Where's the Twilight fans when you need them?
Not here.
Crickets.
Not me.
Crickets.
Yep, total crickets. Someone actually just asked about the move knight to d4 here. But the problem with knight to d4 is you are operating with a pinned knight, and white can just respond with knight to c3, keeping black away from the b4 pawn. You have a hard time figuring out a move here, because after knight c3, you're just developing for white. You're saying that what's your next move from black's perspective? You can then go knight a4 check to c5 anyway, and black has yet to regain the pawn trouble. So knight d4 is a reasonable looking move. I just don't think it pans out at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, hard to suggest closing the file where you're ganging up on. The Mendel game from Jane 1996.
I was going to say that before, and I was like, I don't want to say it out loud.
Because it sounds like something close to Lucian's defense, you know, some sort of mentally unstable chess player. The Mendel game.
The Mendel game.
You know?
Mendel game. Yeah. So, king to b5.
Yeah, I don't see anything but king to b5.
I wonder if Magnus is thinking about retreating just to keep the game a little spicier, but I don't know. Because king c7 just moving backward sometimes is the right strategy.
But here I think it's pretty straightforward. Just not the right strategy.
What if I go back to b8?
All the way?
Yep.
Yeah, I guess the point is you're definitely still winning back your pawn, right? That's your point.
But did I do it in the best way possible? I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I see a nice move. So b5, knight b4, bishop b6. You can't go. Oh, you can go rook c8. I thought you couldn't go rook c8 because I had bishop a7 check.
Because the bishop.
But there's a bishop defending that.
But I was going to say, can I just go straight forward ahead?
Well, I was worried about bishop c7 takes e5, or the mate on the a file actually.
Yeah, actually, that would be fun.
Yep.
Okay. Nice.
But
okay, that's just an example of us proving why we don't think king c7 really should be played.
Well, if you can go rook c8, I don't think you're super unhappy about that position. But yeah, I'm not sure that's really playing for a win in the optimal form.
In the end of lines like this, you're still going to be trying to win back
actually.
one of your pawns that you probably could have won earlier.
Yeah, just take on c8 and play d4.
Yeah.
Your idea
Take on c8 and play d4.
comes to life.
Yep. So Magnus going to use his time to think, because perhaps bishop e3 was slightly surprising, given that Fabiano's saying, "Come get me, big boy," right? Invite the king up.
Yep.
And this is.
I saw someone say, "What's wrong with rook takes d3? You can't take the rook pawn d3 and you're in check."
Well, right now you're in check. Yes.
Right.
So maybe they were talking about one of our analysis lines, but yeah, not possible currently. And okay, so bishop e3 check is on the board. Again, I'm having trouble figuring out why this isn't just straightforward. I'm trying to think, maybe there's a move we're missing. Knight a3 looks like it does nothing but invite more abusive behavior from the king. Just doesn't look fun. I mean, I don't know if I want to go all the way in, right? But I'm kind of like, I've come this far, figured I'd just keep on running, right?
And then if you lose the d3 pawn as well, you're going to be down a pawn.
Right. So, at this point, he's like, figure since I come this far, why turn back?
I wonder if he is thinking about it.
It looks like king b5 has just been played.
Okay. So it's exactly what we were discussing. Knight c3 check, probably going to be played.
Again, unless some random move we're missing, but it seems highly unlikely. Knight c3 check, and then we'll know if Fabiano has anything else up his sleeve that he thinks he's going to be taking advantage of this king by this move. Either he plays a move like knight d5, or tries to come up with something tricky against the king. But the problem I have with this is like how painful is this endgame going to be for white? I guess not that painful because I'm winning this pawn.
Right. So
this was the line you kind of looked at before. We trade off a whole bunch, and in the end, black does indeed have the extra pawn, but white's rook very active on the 7th rank. Pieces coordinated. Doesn't seem like Like Black has a ton of winning chances there despite the extra pawn, but don't count out Magnus because he will continue to push that position 4-on-3. And there we go. We have our first brilliant engagement in the Photoshop contest. Probably instantly taking the Diamond membership with that one. That's brilliant for those of you who haven't been following the Fabi leaks of 2018 and the controversy that is a supposed. Okay, and there we go. A supposed leak of preparation. Seems pretty clear it was, given the reaction, but how useful will it be or not? So, anyway, interesting. Very good. Very good. And on the board, we now have knight to d5 happening. So, the variation predicted long ago by my partner here coming true. And,
Yep. Up to
knight to d5, takes. Position will update here in just a moment. And after knight d5, bishop takes, pawn takes. Likely nothing but that line we saw, where once again, Magnus will be pushing this one here for a while.
Well, I don't know. You think he'll be pushing this for a while?
I mean, he's up a pawn, and he is Magnus.
And he's not keeping the pawn, though. That was my initial point. Right? So if you take on d5, just rook b1 takes b7.
I know, but he'll still end up being up a pawn with that move knight d8. That's what I was saying.
Right, but then so this is where we looked at this a long time ago.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
g3.
Right, knight d8.
Check on c7, and then knight g5. And I'm just taking I think this is actually pretty forcing bishop h6, something like this. Well, actually, then now all of a sudden looking better for
White. Yeah, because suddenly this king is actually on the wrong side of the board.
Yeah.
And the reason we're saying that, just to keep with our thought before we just dismiss it, is if something like, okay, wait, sorry.
Yeah, you can do this.
Yeah, then take here. Now all of a sudden you're in an endgame where, okay, I don't know that it's critical, but sometimes if the script is flipped and you're playing on the other side of the board, the king that was so much more active compared to the white counterpart is now actually on the wrong side of the board to deal with white's threats.
Yeah, you want the king on f6, not
Yeah.
on b2. So
Okay,
rook
but
b1.
we're headed down that line. Rook to b1 check coming, forcing moves galore right now. And
Yeah.
we'll see if one side can give us something.
Oh, wait a second. If king c3, rook b7, is there e4?
Back rank problems. I have them. I can't take. That's a pin emote. I mean, in back rank.
That's checkmate.
Like you say that.
But
Checkmate.
it is rook c7. Rook c7 is really... Because if you take on f3, I take on c6, you take on d3, I take there, and we've seen things
Draw.
like this before.
Yep. Okay. It's an interesting shot, though. But after rook b1, looks like king c3 has already been played. I'm expecting we see rook to b7. I mean, is there any other possibility that white has here besides rook b7? Probably not.
Actually, maybe rook b7, you can start with knight d8. We're talking about knight d8 for black, but by starting with the knight d8, we can take on d3 with our king. And that actually lets our king come back a little more quickly.
Probably
And
still
bishop
not
h6.
enough, though.
Now bishop h6, I take on e3 with my king. And that
And you're threatening mate in the end of that line, actually.
Mhm.
You even have this move.
Exactly.
Okay. That's interesting. That could be a change of move order. Causes white some problems. Knight comes to d8.
So how does white continue? Well, what's black's next move, right? Taking on
d3.
d3.
There's this move.
So we have to
bishop
check.
G.
We have to check first, right? So we don't lose the rook.
Oh, for sure.
And then king takes d3.
This was a move I was wondering if it's possible at
But
some
knight.
point.
Oh, yeah, knight e6.
Right, and if I take here, you have e4.
Right.
Right.
And things are getting.
Now
Weird.
these things would get weird, right? Not the good kind of weird.
Nope.
Yep.
Even e4 right away. That's getting very tricky. So rook b7. You have to play rook b7. There's otherwise you're just giving up d3 next, and you're just down the pawn. So rook takes b7. It's a must.
Yeah, we did miss out Yermo's mating trap. If you want to tell us what it was, I just saw comments in Chess TV, and I'd be interested to show it.
What was Yermo's mating trap?
I'm trying to go back.
We should, save it for his video, right?
Save it for yeah, I was going to say, that's just, oh, okay, there we go. God, this is what Fabi is going for. King b5, knight c3, king b4, knight d5, takes, rook d5, rook b1, king c3, rook b7, knight d8, rook c7, king d3.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So this is exactly the line, the point here. Sorry I did that in my head, everybody. But here's the line. At the end of this line of takes, you have king f1.
And if e4 by black, which is a very bad move, now knight e1 is checkmate.
Self-mate.
But of course, you don't have to play e4. You can do something else, and that way king still has the e4 square to run to.
But then you would get knight g5 with forcing stuff.
Yeah.
So. That's an interesting... Ooh, look at that.
All this is happening?
Yermo called it. That's why you got to watch Yermo's daily recap videos.
Yeah. So this rook c7 check you have to do. Well, you can go rook a7, but there's no real point to that. The rook on c7 is clearly the right square, giving the king a check. And so after rook c7, king takes d3.
Yermo called this like 10 minutes ago, by the way. Amazing. Thank you, Alex. Takes, and then king f1.
So I guess bishop f6 is the move. Protect your knight. Maybe make knight g5 a little harder to play.
Kind of funny how awkward the king is suddenly, though.
Yeah. Thankfully, you can't take over the e4 square. The only way to do so is knight d2, but now you can't mate me with that knight.
Yep.
So you need two knights to knight d2, knight e1 mate.
Yep.
Or a knight to a bishop would do.
Story of my life. Two knights. This isn't going to be a one night stand. Need two knights.
Oh, that was just begging to be said, and I'm very sad you said it.
Well, the one night can't make it happen, that's all. All right. Well, thank you, Alex, for that. Interesting, yeah. So after either one of these, I think the same idea. You can go g4 with the threat of knight e1 and king e2, and then rook c4. That's Alex's idea, after either bishop f6 or h6. So it's suddenly a little bit awkward for Magnus's king.
That's actually becoming very tricky there. Wait, so g4.
Well, one question is, after check, does let's say Magnus has like a wake-up call moment and doesn't take here? Isn't he still just fine by moving the king? I mean, because d3's falling.
Right, but somehow I don't like the fact that my knight's on d8 and that your bishop g5 idea is looking more enticing. So maybe play bishop g5 immediately.
Then you go back for this?
And then go knight d2 check is an option, but I don't know if it's the one I want to use. And king f1 is a possibility as well. Yeah, and f7 is just hanging.
It's funny, because at the end of this line, like you said, you foreshadowed it a little bit ago, this king may end up regretting how far he's journeyed, right? Away from home.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a shocking turn of events?
I think that to rook c7, king d3, I'm still not convinced that black is actually getting checkmated. I don't think black is getting checkmated. But it would be interesting.
Yeah, and so, if you're just joining us, what we're highlighting is that at the end of a forced line that we've kind of been looking at for a while, it seems as though the world champion Magnus Carlsen is again pushing with black. He's up a pawn, right? But Yermolinsky's interesting idea is that suddenly this king has actually maybe gone too far. Bishop to f6, g4, and then rook d6, according to Alex, is maybe forced for black.
Okay,
to open up the d5 retreat.
So now that I know what you're doing, instead of bishop f6, I'm going to play h5 to stop everything.
Okay.
I'll give you the f7 pawn, but the good news is my pawn h5 is now better protected. If you go knight g5 here, well, you can take on f7, but I'm not getting mated, so bishop h6, as per usual. I'm just trying to trade things.
Draw.
Well, it's better. That almost looks better for black. It's not just a simple draw. Bishop h6, you take.
Yeah. Well, okay. Sorry. If you end up getting that line with the extra e pawn.
Right.
Okay. So what about trying to?
I see Yermo says good thinking, avoiding checkmate.
Yeah,
good thinking.
Exactly. Any way to try to keep doing Uncle Yermo's mating idea? It doesn't look like it. Looks like we're running out of steam. Okay, again, the point, everyone, is like if you did make a slow move like h3, which I don't think you can do, but e4 is the mate. So that's the point, is that the king is a little bit awkward. Playing h3 only because the knight still can't move because the pawn. Pawn still can't move because the bishop. So as slow and silly as it seems, maybe I don't give up on the idea just yet.
Yeah, I wonder how black should respond here, because g4, this mating trap, is a bit annoying, but perhaps I can ignore it. But I don't see the best way to ignore it.
Because if you go back for this idea, then we're just transposing, basically. right?
And then we have to go rook d6 again, as Yermo was saying, and not.
Something like this occurs.
But now I have d5 to run too.
You almost have this actually. Let's see. Oh no, you don't. You get out.
Yeah,
Okay.
just in time.
Just in time. But this is scary. This is awkward.
Well, my king has run all the way back, then I'm happy. But yeah, until my king gets there, I'm
Yeah,
definitely
exactly.
a bit nervous.
Yeah. It would be interesting. So knight to d8.
What
Fabiano
is
taking
Fabi
a think
thinking
here.
about?
A little surprised by that, given that he's the one who kind of forced this line. You would think he would have played rook c7 check quickly and try to get Magnus to blunder, but no, not a blunder. But
Yeah, what is thinking
whether
about?
or not there's a mate, yeah, you're right. Alex will go into that afterwards, of course.
I am confused what Fabi is thinking about.
Again, from the beginning of the match, it hasn't become an overarching storyline because, okay, the results are still nothing but, Nietzsche, right? Draws. But Fabiano has had some more weird things, right? Where we've been like, what's he doing with his time here, right? And, that led to us mentioning Talbot Vinnick in game 1.
Yep.
Where he almost lost in terms of just getting himself under really bad time pressure, and that's why we remember, regardless of preparation, what we do with our seconds, that you cook up, like you still have to execute. And at the board, sometimes time management can be awkward if you feel a little rusty, right? You end up taking time on moves that maybe you shouldn't. There is an increment, Amazing Master, 30 seconds plus per move for both these players. So,
Someone just said to analyze black king to b2 after rook c7 check. But the king on b2 doesn't actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah, we were kind of saying that this doesn't... Okay, one crazy point is that because I haven't lost the pawn yet and you backed away, I could get away with this maybe.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? Why not? So, and then I'm 2 moves away from guarding everybody. So that's one other reason why you wouldn't want to do that. But it, not a bad question there from the Twitch chat.
The bishop d2, that's a good question. What about bishop d2?
Bishop d2.
Instead of rook c7. Throw the bishop
So the check in here, and then
yeah,
the king takes.
The king takes d3, and my king still has the e4 and the c4 square, so run to, and your rook's still under attack.
Yeah, and you can't get away with this because I think e4.
Yeah.
And your knight's over. So not a bad idea if your idea was to try Uncle Yermo's mating net, but you're just too slow because of e4. And so finally we do have liftoff. Fabiano has played the move. Rook to c7 check.
My guess is he wasn't thinking about this move as much as the future moves. Rook c7 check was
for sure
abundantly clear to us, which means it was likely abundantly clear to him. And so he's just trying to figure out, is this king f1 mating net kind of thing? Is that the way to go?
We're getting a lot of questions about the format now, so let's remind everybody of exactly what it is. Yes, the time control is 40 moves for the first 140 minutes that you have, 100 minutes, sorry, you have on the clock, which is an hour and 40 minutes. My apologies. At that time, you will get 50 minutes more. And then there are different thresholds and benchmarks you can see where you get bonus time throughout the entire portion. Throughout the entire game, there is also 30 seconds per move. So the way it's set up is as you reach different benchmarks, you're given more time because the assumption is made that there's still a lot to think about. And, you give the players more time to do so. But overall, throughout, the 30 seconds extra per move is kind of key. So there you go. Hopefully that answers all the questions we have in both chat rooms I see about the format. So. Magnus is king on a marathon.
That's
right, running a marathon. Here we go. Let's see if we get Uncle Yermo's mating idea.
That'd be awesome.
If he calls it, if he calls like a crazy mating idea that ends up like being something that gets Magnus in trouble, that'll be a video highlight by itself. Okay, waiting for white to move here.
Yep.
I think king f1 is the idea. And again, we're trapping the king, at least we're hoping to, and trying to invite opportunities to self-mate. And okay, I'll be surprised if we see something different, but maybe Fabiano has another way to kind of try for the same sort of thing. Initially we were looking at ideas like knight g5 in these lines, but now we're not as happy about it because knight g5 would be met by bishop h6. And there's a lot of variations where regardless of how you take, we'll just do it this way. Actually, this way doesn't work because you have this move at the end. Yeah. But the point is, if you trade in a lot of these types of endgames, black will have very good winning chances with the extra e-pawn that is already passed. So that's why you're not just maybe gallivanting forward with your pony to get your pawns back, for those of you who may have missed that analysis earlier. giving forcing checks seems fun. Always check, it might be mate, but then you run out of checks and you haven't done anything but maybe create weaknesses, and black is up a pawn.
Yep.
And again, we have liftoff, and Fabiano has played Yermo's idea. So that's why King F1 makes so much sense, because the way you would maybe help your chances right here, right now, is to take advantage of what's temporarily awkward in your opponent's position. The king, the knight being on the 8th rank, the threats you have on the 7th rank. Magnus has something to figure out here.
Yep. So the Twitch chat is rooting for E4, of course.
E4, E4. It would just be, I could not have Chess.com OMG enough. I'd freeze. So we saw a question in the Twitch chat earlier wondering, what are the rules at tournaments like this if the players walk away? There is usually a designated bathroom that only the players can use, first of all, during the event, and that's to ensure no tomfoolery. We've all seen The Godfather with a certain thing taped above the stall, right? Not to say that would happen. A cell phone or anything else. That was a great reference right there.
It's a good reference, just not applicable to this situation.
No, it was, because why would you have a bathroom when only the players can use it, other than the fact that you don't want there being any sort of shenanigans in the bathroom?
Yeah.
I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, it wouldn't be the same device that was taped above for Al Pacino to get in the infamous Godfather scene.
You're spoiling the movie for those who haven't seen it.
If you haven't seen The Godfather,
you're young.
Unfollow me on Twitter. Well, stop watching the show. Just go away. No, I'm kidding. Go watch those things and then stay here. So the rules are, to get back to the very good question from Twitch chat, what are the players allowed to do? They're other than the fact that there's a bathroom designated for them, there aren't really any restrictions. There's also like a snack area just for the players.
Yep.
So there's a refreshments area, there's a bathroom area, but there are no other restrictions, because if these guys are just wandering off, I mean, that's kind of their own thing, right? It's like, hey, are you going to focus on the game or not, right? So there aren't really restrictions. I think there is an overall, like, you can't leave the board for more than 20 minutes or something like that. There's some rule like that. What
would you be doing if you were away from the board for 20 minutes?
I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to say is, what are you laughing at? Stop laughing.
I'm just laughing at the chat. Am I not allowed to chat?
It's like I make a great pop culture reference and you go nuts.
Don't talk.
It's so great.
Is that Craig Sager?
Yeah.
R.I.P.
The late Craig Sager. Shout out, Mr. Sager.
Well,
I actually saw him having a drink at a downtown Phoenix hotel after a Phoenix Suns game, back when we had Nash and back when we were good.
Yep.
And he was in a pink suit, just like that, by the way. So
I believe it.
Shout out to Craig Sager.
I love this Twitch comment by Don't Talk to Chris. First, a great username. Second of all, I don't think it's reasonable to call plot revelations from films that came out 40 plus years ago as spoilers. What's like the time frame? Like, what's the threshold there?
If a movie is great, you should never really spoil it, Chris. I'm an expert on this, so I'm going to tell you. But so I think the call out of me is deserved. But I appreciate you kind of saying it. I mean, I agree. Like, if you haven't seen it already.
Yes, you should have definitely seen.
If people refer infamous scenes from movies, like, it's not really whole. And plus, I didn't spoil the plot. There's a very important scene.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of a coming of age for a young mobster. And anyway, that's why the players have their own bathroom. Thank you, Al Pacino. And that's why they have their own refreshments area. Other than that, there are no other restrictions. If someone looks into the fine print and proves I'm wrong, please let me know. I don't think there's any other restrictions in regards to what they can do.
I'm sure they get wanded and like make sure
there's
no
I'm
cell
sure
phones.
They get wanded. I'm sure they can't. I mean, I don't know.
No person
no
playing
crowd surfing, no jumping off the crowd. You know?
No person playing for World Championship is going to cheat. Like, think about how much worse it is for you. The risk is not worth the reward.
Of course.
Because like you're good enough to win the championship by yourself, and if you get caught cheating, you're just done for.
You're right.
Right. You are
forever. Not
you're
just
fodder
that match,
for the
but for all.
You're
for
fodder
all
for
time
the Twitter trolls.
Right.
And
these days, there's always a camera watching. You should just assume you're living your life on
hopefully
camera
not
somewhere.
in the bathroom.
Depends. Yeah.
I'm hoping not. You know.
Yeah. Exactly. Live your life like you're on camera. Spoiler alert from Systematics in the chess video. It says the Titanic sinks. What happens with Jack and Kate? What?
Kate. You mean Rose?
Oh, Rose. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What are you doing over here?
Her real name's Kate. Sorry.
Oh, the actress. Yeah. Okay, but you just ruined a really, really important moment in film history.
Jack. On. H5 was played. Robert's move. H5 was played, but I'm gonna say that my move's gonna be played.
Okay. It's actually funny because I only found that move because Yermo was trying to checkmate us.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of happened.
Classic Yermo for trying to checkmate us. But here's the point. H5 was played to stop G4, and if you're just joining us, there was actually some really instructive banter between Yermolinsky in the Chess TV chat and Robert Hess here right next to me, where moves like bishop f6 or h6 to kind of stop obvious threats on g5 would be met by g4, where suddenly now that you're controlling this escape square, in fact, I'll show it here, if you give check and king up and you're threatening to come here, they can run the king out voluntarily and there's no looking back. Black is totally safe. So the point of a move like g4 first is taking advantage of the fact that the king still can't move. You still would only be checkmating yourself. And if you go for this, suddenly moves like king e2 leave you with all kinds of weird problems.
Yep.
So again, the analysis here is attempting to prove that white might have enough to justify that he's now down a pawn by trying to take advantage of this awkward king, of the fact that all of these pieces are kind of key right where they are. The rook has to be here to guard the knight. The knight has to be here to guard the pawn. Whenever your opponent, Robert, what advice would you have on that in terms of calculating when you basically have a position where it could be slipping out of your hand any moment, right? All of your advantages are based on the fact that your opponent really just has awkward pieces. Because looking at Black's camp, there's nothing bad about Black's position. There's no long-term structural problems. You either take advantage of the awkwardness now or you don't. What would be your advice on how to calculate in those moments?
Yeah, it's actually very tough decision to make, because sometimes you think, oh, I don't see myself getting checkmated, so I'll just continue with the plan that I want to go forth with. But besides the checkmate plan, an issue was that the pawn on h7 is a target for that rook on c7. It might not look that way right now, but if you see that once the pawn f7 is removed from the board, the pawn on h7 is in trouble. So, for example, let's I wish we could give white just another move instead of h5, like so the knight could go to g5. Let's say bishop f8.
Okay.
Knight g5, bishop h6. So we were looking at lines like this with knight takes f7, bishop takes e3, let's say exactly like this. Well, now I have to be worried about getting checkmated.
Yeah.
But if I had left for my king, say my pawn was on g3, the point is that the pawn h7 would be under attack. So h5 not only protects the king well in advance of that mating net that Yermo was trying to put us in, but also gets that pawn off the 7th rank, so it's not a target once that pawn f7 falls.
Addison Lee has a great comment. We've sent both chat rooms into this really fun conversation of spoiling great movies. Spoiler: people from Jurassic World wouldn't learn their mistakes, and there will continue to be ongoing movies. I feel like that applies to both the directors and the storyline. All right, h3 is played. I love it. Fabiano not giving up on the mating net. Here we go. Play h3 and try to bring some tricks.
And I think the Yermo line is going to come to fruition. Bishop f6, g4, and then rook d6. Or I don't know if you take first or play rook d6. Either one works. Play rook d6.
And the point here, we highlighted the point of g4. Everyone is to guard f5 as the escape score. Now you've freed up d5 with rook d6. And I want to play. Do it. Can't do it.
You can. It's not a bad
but
move.
you have knight e6.
Yeah, then you can. Oh, I was trying to go rook back to c7.
No, you can't go back anymore, right?
Yep. So knight e6 is very useful.
never come back, Charlie.
Wait, okay, rook c5, knight e6. Can I take on e5 with check?
Oh.
But
Okay, but
yeah, this is a Drinsky. And
Both
if king
will
e4 after knight e5 check.
if you're going for the mating net, though, that was my whole point, was to try to guard that escape square so I could try to bring the heat. But what about the line we looked at? Here, here, and here. And the point is, when you go here, I don't know.
I'm not afraid of this, though.
Right, your king is running back, but I was just trying to say, like, if we look maybe a little deeper, maybe there's still some awkwardness.
Yeah, don't blunder with rook c6, because the knight b4 check is...
Right.
Wait, now you go
Also,
king d6.
don't blunder with
Actually, it's not even that big of a blunder.
knight e6 is a blunder because of mating ideas.
Would try to checkmate me in the center of the board. But rook c6 actually is not that bad of a blunder, because I have king d6.
Oh, you have this.
It's nice.
Nice. Okay, so rook c6 might be the key then. Although I have this move.
Yeah, then I just put my king back.
King back, and I have nothing. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So I'm not getting what I need on rook c6.
Yeah, like we keep saying, if the black king makes his way back, then Magnus will play this on forever, trying to win the game for sure.
Because you have an extra pawn.
Right.
Let's not forget that. So the mating net aside, you don't get what you need. Sometimes if you can't get what you want, you get what you need.
But they've made a couple moves here, so...
Oh, king e4 was played.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the other way to prevent g4, is to just come back immediately, right?
Yep. So he's just
Attacking
trying
the
to.
knight.
He's just trying to make it. So knight takes f7 after knight g5 check. This is all reasonably forced. Knight takes f7. Takes. It looks like you're losing your bishop here, but you can't lose your bishop with bishop f6. Protects it, and the king will go back to e6. Everything's defended. This position is as equal as they come.
And that's probably where we're headed. Knight g5 check was played. King f5. Probably nothing better than to take on f7.
Yep. And honestly, only white can be better there, because if you take on f7, you have to trade knights and play bishop f6, right? So,
Yep.
Once those trades happen and bishop goes to f6, white can try for a little trick. So
What's
it
that?
takes, bishop f6, g4 check, hoping that you take me twice. I'll take you once, but I have to go king e6. If I take your pawn, I lose my bishop, and that would be terrible. So I go king e6, and okay, white has a slightly better pawn structure. Can you try to push this pawn on g5 perhaps? But okay, there are too few pawns remaining for white to be in. Excuse me, for black to be in any sort of danger. So
Yep.
This is liquidation. They've reached this position, and after bishop f6, I think that they may call it, but we'll see. Remains to be seen because there are not that many pieces remaining. If Fabi
We
wants,
still
to
have
keep
some
trying.
outside chance that someone maybe mates themselves. So don't go anywhere.
Yeah, that would not be good luck.
Well, they're headed for this bishop 6 line, so I think the last thing you highlighted that might be possible is the move g4, takes, and sliding over with the idea that g6 is maybe a weak pawn. But I obviously completely agree with you. You would need to play fantasy chess here. Like, I get to put my king here, right, on e4.
Yep.
I get to play g5, and then I get to attack the pawn, right, without you doing anything to have any winning chances.
Yep.
So
And I would not be surprised if they shake hands right now.
they're probably thinking about it, but I'm hopeful. There we go.
They just
There
shook
we go.
hands.
Get
But,
g4, right? G4, my favorite emote. Hey, I get to use it.
but someone just said they just shook hands, so I would not be surprised if that is.
Not before I get to use my G4 emote, though. Come on, chat. Stay with me. Woo!
Game is officially a draw. Yes.
Oh, man. But hey. The official word says, replay says I got in G4 before the game was officially drawn. So there you go.
It counts.
Touchdown. It counts. It's good. The point is good. It is off in time. And we have another draw. You know, I think at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think there were some different things today, right? There were some signs of these players coming a little bit more out of their shell.
Yep.
Right, particularly Fabiano, with the b4 idea, and then you have world champions doing what they do best, dealing with both the opening surprise,
Yep.
and then handling it well enough to, if anything, be pushing a little bit. Maybe we will once again be looking at recap videos of Robert's idea becoming true, which is that back here on move 20, maybe b5 to kind of cement the weakness.
Definitely the critical moment.
Definitely, and you could argue, you know, because we were talking about white being better maybe earlier, maybe the previous one was right here. Probably Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky and others will end up finding the answer that Robin and I couldn't during the live show, is was d4 really a chance to have some potential winning chances for white, or was it also likely to head to the same type of result we got here? So it'll be interesting to see, obviously, what post-game analysis says. Certainly the peaceful result takes a little bit of wind out of your sails when we had a really exciting opening, but I like the tempo that was tried to be set here,
Yeah.
regardless of how well it went for the challenger. I think now you're really in buckle down mode. The best case scenario for Team Caruana, or okay, that's harsh. Of course, Magnus could also overpush with white and lose, right? Carlsen can beat it with black, but you would be happy to be moving into a game 8 still with a peaceful result. Given that now Magnus Carlsen will get 2 whites in games 6 and 7.
Yeah, game 1 was a tough test for Fabiano, just getting new to the World Championship stage, all the media attention. But this is really, from the chess perspective, the toughest part. Black in consecutive games. And I want to give a shout out to Potzer and Master, said B4 was a cool idea. Props to Fabi's team for bringing that out. Still wanted an open Sassoon at one point. I agree. Right?
Yeah.
You know, in order to challenge Magnus, it seems like you can't keep going back to these Rossolimo lines where he feels comfortable. You'll definitely need to do something a little bit more.
Yeah,
With
well,
more
we've said it, and that's why I was disappointed to see it here. And then I was, interesting line, but, how many more times do you want to beat your head against the same solid wall, right? Magnus, to his credit, is at least kind of poking in different places, right? Didn't allow Fabiano to repeat the same prep that he equalized so easily with in Game 2 as black. So, of course, the storyline builds up. We're all eagerly awaiting to see hands that will be revealed by these players. Not much else to bring you besides a shout-out again to our guest, of course, Daryl Morey, Grandmaster. Not Grandmaster. In fact, I said that because there was someone in the chat that said, oh, he's the GM of the Houston Rockets. That means he's the Grandmaster of the Houston Rockets. So great comment there. You got in there, Freud. Now get out. But shout-out to our guest, General Manager Daryl Morey. Let's remind you of all the different ways you can check in with content while we are not live. International Master John Bartholomew will have his next rest day show on Saturday the 17th. After that, International Master Levy Rosman will be taking over the rest day recap shows for the remainder of the month. You can already follow both of them now with their respective Twitch channels that were listed there. Grandmaster Yasser Sarawan is doing video recaps for Chess.com members only. Right now they're breaking into a single game and a single video per every game because Yaz has so much to say. So free content from Yasser Sarawan. # you're welcome. And then, of course, we have Alex Shmerlinsky, who was with us in the chat today, engaging with the fans, having a good time in Chess TV chat, and almost called a surprisingly sexy checkmate.
Yep, but it wasn't meant to be.
It wasn't meant to be. I think you and I are meant to be. And if it's meant to be, it'll be.
Oh,
it'll be.
You're the worst.
Baby, if it's meant to be.
You're the worst.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Get at us on Twitter. Engage with the hashtag official Carlsen Caruana. Of course, hashtag Chess TV. Robin and I are so grateful that you've chosen to hang with us for this month of November as we build into the Speed Chess Championship as well in the first weekend of December. So until tomorrow, enjoy and stick around and take the raid over to the Chess Broad channel and hang out with them, see what their thoughts are on it. Have some fun enjoying chess on Twitch for the rest of the evening. See you tomorrow.